It's a different Ben's wife?
Although there was drama about that at the wedding.
I completely missed the wedding.
I know. You missed the wedding. You missed the divorce. You missed the wedding. But we can always do it again in Miami next year.
Which Ben was it?
It was Ben Kaufman.
Ah, Ben Kaufman. Not Carmen.
There was drama. You cannot. There's some ground rules to getting married to a Ben in Miami. You can't marry one and then like swim with another, and then like go off at night with. I mean, the whole thing was at night anyway. There was a lot of drama. The Bens are very jealous, but that's one of their best qualities.
They're a very odd bunch, in the best way, the most endearing way possible. Bens out there who may be listening. Very talented bunch too.
Yes,
we've got a lot of them working on very interesting parts of the Bitcoin stack. You, the Ben that we have in front of us today,
one of the older Bens.
Like I was saying before we hit record, I'm very excited for this conversation because I'm a bit of like a design nerd, if you will. Not where I want to call myself a design nerd, but I've had experience jumping into a design boot camp to learn more about tech after I quit my job in the financial world. And like I was saying before we hit record, it was extremely illuminating to me because not until I did that and immersed myself in that sort of class setting and focus, like, hey, you're going to learn about design, particularly designing for digital spaces, did I realize how important design is and how hard it is to design good experiences. And for the context of this conversation, I can't imagine how hard it is to design for Bitcoin, which is a free open source software, very highly technical. You're dealing with private public key pairs and a bunch of other variables. And so there, to me, having that design background, Bitcoin's always seemed like a crazy opportunity for designers to design a whole new financial system. Obviously that's like the go-to trip, but like there's a shit ton that needs to get done, so it's like a wide open canvas. Is that true?
I hope so. I think so. I think there are definitely parameters. There's some principles, right? You want to take the things you learn in these boot camps or in school or just picking it up on the internet, playing around. You want to keep some of those classic principles, I think, in my own practice. But that is sort of the most exciting part, I think. I don't know, maybe I'm just preferential to design, but I think that's almost why design is more exciting than programming for me, because there are these opportunities and because you can kind of figure it out with other people, what you want it to look and feel like, what other people could jump in. I think there's consensus in design too, which is something I think we're still figuring out on the Bitcoin side.
Where's the consensus in the typeface right now? Like there seems to be consensus around all the fonts and...
Oh yeah, type design is huge. I think it's been kind of like slept on for years. I can't wait to see more drama, more heated discussions about it. I'm here for it. Let's go.
Well, let's just take a step back before we get on all the Bitcoin stuff. Like what's your background? How'd you get into design and how'd you find your way to Bitcoin?
I found my way to Bitcoin before design.
Well,
I mean, I've always loved design too, and it was something that I think I always wanted to do, art and design, but maybe like a lot of other people in Bitcoin who I've met who are also like immigrant parents or people in communities where they say you need to get a safe job either in finance or nursing or something stable, right? You know, so like art and design was like kind of off the table for a while. Went into medicine, worked at a university for a while, learned about Bitcoin, dating someone who was active in Silk Road, but
boss.
Yeah, well, yeah, it happened. I think it's how a lot of people learned about it too, and that was probably one of the main use cases. So, I think that people, at least for myself, around that time, didn't want to use it. I was like, "Is this illegal? Am I doing something wrong?" I didn't even go on the site, so didn't tell anyone for a while. Just kind of like in IRC, doing my thing, as I think many people were. They're just kind of like very low key. But then years later, had a media arts practice in the Dog Patch in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And just started experimenting with how can like code be expressive and functional. Things that were like processing with Ben Fry, Casey Reese, like how to draw on the internet, kind of like programming to be art. And Parsons, actually, you're a New Yorker, right? Like
yeah.
Parsons around 2017, they were opening up a new program in communication design. So that's how I got like a formal education in product and interaction. So like maybe around the same time we were doing boot camp / grad school situation.
Yeah.
It's funny how that works, right? Like,
it is funny how it works. And It's fascinating 'cause it's to me, again, after taking that class, like just like the way I viewed everything, like apps just completely changed. It's like, this could be a much better experience. You never think of it. And so like that's what I want to get at with this conversation. Like until you're immersed in like the design, learning about design, like you don't really think about much. Maybe like an app has like a shitty experience or something like that, but you don't really think why. It's because these people don't design good processes, and that's another thing we were talking about before we hit record. Like one of my favorite examples of bad design that is pretty infamous in user design and user interface and user experience circles is like a picture of a park where you have a pathway, a concrete pathway that was constructed, and it's very rigid, and you make like a right angle turn. And that's like what the designer designed and implemented. But when you actually get the actual user experience, you'll just see people walking through the grass, and there's just like a natural path through the grass of people actually interacting with the physical space in a way that they want to, and that the designer didn't think of. When you go apply that to like the digital space, like what you have to think of is like, where are we designing digital experiences where a designer's doing it, not really understanding how users want to and are eventually going to use their application or software, whatever it may be.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm curious. You brought up a few things that we didn't actually talk about this specific part beforehand, but you brought up apps, and I think that's a pretty interesting like way to get your foundation and start with designing in digital spaces. But I also wonder with Bitcoin specifically, to me, I feel like I designed apps and I was learning this sort of skill set. But in terms of like Bitcoin, I think the apps are very valuable, and learning the user experience is very valuable, but also focusing on like the beautiful qualities of the internet is sometimes lost when you're so focused on like, okay, well, we're supposed to fit it in within these dimensions. Like, I think maybe there's a balance to it. Maybe we can take like some of these things from like improving on user experience on the apps, but also like focusing on like what's beautiful about Bitcoin and these qualities that haven't existed before with apps that are emerging that maybe we're missing if we're too structured. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. Like we're dealing with Bitcoin, which is, again, deals with private public key pairs. It's very interactive if you're using it correctly, right? Like compare that to like a Bank of America app where you just need Face ID.
It's a little scary, right?
Yeah, to get into your bank account, and then you can transfer money, and
yeah.
You're not really doing anything. You're personally not interacting with like the Fed wire transfer or whatever rails Bank of America is using. But if you're using Bitcoin, like if I have a Blue Wallet, and I'm using their on-chain wallet, and I have the private public key pairs, like I am interacting with my private key every time I send a transaction there, which is a different type of interaction that has to be designed around.
Yeah, and designed, and I think like people don't always understand that design too. It's like, the whole buying a cup of coffee example, but it's like people might understand the fees at a particular time can be like way more expensive than like the coffee itself. So helping people understand Bitcoin at the same time as like changing these apps and not changing them to make them worse, like hopefully improving them so these really incredible qualities like privacy and security are still preserved. So that way we still can tell people like this is the freest form of money you have, but do it in a slick way where it's so natural and they don't even have to think about it. That's like my fantasy is like, my fantasy is like when people just can like open whatever it is, their app of choice, their wallet of choice, and it just feels natural. It feels good. And there's like this almost like poetic quality where it's something that people shouldn't have to feel like I feel right now people have to do so much work with Bitcoin, and they almost feel like for me, I don't feel like I even deserve some of these like things. I feel like for so long we've been like done dirty by tech that it's like it feels weird and wrong to have something that just works, that it's supposed to work really well. So my like fantasy is like people have really great security, really great privacy, and it's easy. It's just effortless. I don't know. How do we get there, Marty?
I don't know. Well, that's the question I was just about to ask is, can we get there? A lot of the times you'll hear like it's impossible to create that due to the nature of private public key pairs and like how interactive you have to be. Like people are going to have to stomach quote unquote shitty experiences if they want to use it the right way.
Why do we tolerate that?
No, I don't see. Me personally, like I agree with you. I wish we could have this grand vision where it was just very seamless. I do see that particular, I wouldn't even call it a criticism, but I guess with the person or type of people that would say what I just uttered, I guess they're coming from the perspective of these are the design restraints we've been giving and something we just have to stomach. Like people are going to have to develop new ways of interacting with their digital life, in particular their money in the digital world, that is going to be more involved and not like interacting with the Venmo or Cash App. But
I feel like there's a balance, don't you?
I do.
I interrupted you a little bit. I'm
No,
sorry. But I was like, I feel that where it's like, they may have a point though. You know, I think it will take a lot more effort. But I think that there's a balance. I think we can still have a lot of these apps. And I know like KYC is not great, but I don't think Cash App is bad if people choose to use it. That's a step in the right direction. And I hope that people can appreciate that and not everyone can understand Bitcoin after doing it for like 7 years or 5 years. Like some people, they haven't even heard about it yet. Like they might need that little extra step. Yeah. I know it's not like the goal. Like if you read the white paper, it's obviously not the goal, but I can like applaud those companies for trying to step in. I don't think it's easy for them policy-wise to like have to deal with SEC and then I don't want that. I don't envy that.
And that's the other thing is as Bitcoiners, you have to resolve like Bitcoin's an open source system. These people want to use it. These companies want to use it. Cash App wants to use it. They can use it and leverage it. And what you have to do is outcompete with the open source technologies to create better experiences that people want to use, right?
Yeah, and maybe there's a world in which those products sort of meet. I feel like to me the most custodial options that I appreciate are the ones who also are interacting with open source projects. Like maybe Cash App isn't specifically, but Square Crypto is amazing. They've done so much for designers. I think more than anyone else supported projects. And the Slack has like 2,000 people now. It's popping off. It's fun. Like I can appreciate that. Like not saying people should jump to custodial solution, but I do feel like if you're not ready to be like, okay, well, like let's hop into Breeze. Like that's not everyone's first introduction. And I think that's okay. But like maybe we get there where we have these like really great free and open source wallets that are slick and easy, but we're not there yet.
No, we're not. I think we'll get there. But I think, all right, so let's do this. Let's zoom out. And from your perspective, what does a designer, whether it be UX, UI, in your opinion, like what is the spectrum of variables that are needed to be taken into consideration when you approach Bitcoin specifically? Like what, obviously, with private public keys, you got different address structures. You mentioned fees, protocol versus Lightning. Like what are you thinking, and how are you explaining the design spectrum to newcomers?
I think the cool part now is we have the design guide. We have bitcoin.design is part of documentation, I think, the past year that's come about that hasn't existed previously. So I can kind of just drop them some links. I hate to be the person who's like pushing anything on anyone to be like, here's where you need to start, but kind of like an invitation, like here's some good places to start, and then check back in with them in a couple of weeks and be like, so what do you think? Like, I was even just talking to Cars. I think like audio and even just having this context too is something that we should document for other people too, and be like, here's what we think are best practices. Here's what you could do. I think everything happening on Lightning is super interesting. The icon set is really great. Just got released today, or like iterated upon today with Bosch and Christoph. So great. I'm working on a merchant section, hopefully with BTC Pay, and it's just been it's so fun. Like just hearing everyone's experiences, and a lot of it is pain points. Honestly, it's like a little sad sometimes, but I think the merchant experience to me personally is so fascinating, and I hope that communities outside of the West specifically are like taking advantage, because I think it's going to be something where everyone has a different community need and use case. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but like that's my preference. I think that if I could focus on one thing in my short lifetime, like just improving the merchant section and like making that really rich and available to a lot of languages, hopefully by next year, in the same way that BTC Pay has like 29 languages.
Mm-hmm. And so HRF just gave you, Human Rights Foundation just gave you a grant to go work on this specific merchant onboarding use case design. What in your view, historically has been the problem for merchants? I mean, obviously, merchant adoption's been a meme since like 2013.
Right. Yeah.
And many people blame price volatility for merchants not adopting it, lack of education, and then it's too hard, like downloading like BTC Pay Server or even OpenNode, or even for some people like Coinbase merchant technologies, whatever they call it these days, is just too much of a hurdle for a lot of these people.
It's a hurdle, I think, but I also think it's very specific to who you're asking and who you're interviewing. I would say, like, probably here in the U.S., it just might be that it's like, oh, it's too hard. But, like, we have computers and great internet, and, like, that's not the case everywhere. For some people, they just have their phones, right? And, like, you could easily start instances and interact on your phone, but I think it becomes a lot more limiting when you have to wait like 38 hours for something to download. Yeah. It's not easy in that regard too, and just resources. And so I hope that when we have like way better internet in places that are more remote or more rural potentially, I don't think it's for lack of people who don't need it and aren't curious and don't want it. I think that it just seems overwhelming to people right now. That's been my experience when I'm talking to people, when I'm interviewing people. And also, I think it's kind of on us, too, as people who are making these tools to actually talk to them and understand their experiences. And I think that we've got to be accountable for that, too. Like, it's on people who are doing open source projects to check in. And I think that one thing Pavlinek does really well is he's been starting to get people who are building wallets open source. And we would just do design reviews for them. This is maybe like a couple months in. And seeing how we can improve it. So I hope that when we can do that with merchants and just like go to stores, like another dream fantasy, it would be like, you just have people, open source designers or developers go in and be like, so what does your coffee shop need? We have like 4 extra hours on the weekend. Can we like help you? Or who do we need to reach out to? And I think it's all about like connecting them with the right people and resources.
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing you brought up, like, designing for open source and having like user interviews to help you create like a better design. Like, how do you do
almost
that?
like a decentralized studio? I've kind of like mentioned this in a few things, and people think it's like kind of crazy, but I was like, wouldn't it be cool if in Austin you just had like, even if it was a co-working space where it's like people could come in, you could say like, okay, Friday afternoons we're open, we have some hardware wallets, people have sent us stuff, come play around with them, we got some people volunteering, we may not know everything, there may be some things that you'll teach us too as like first time users, but having it be something where it's just like open hours. I don't know, when you were in New York or when you're in Chicago doing your boot camp, did they bring you to studios where you got to like learn from different like creators and like leaders on like typography or like, editorial? Like, what was that like for you?
We never went to the studios. They would come to the class though, and they'd walk us through. It was a lot of testing. So that was like we did a lot of A/B testing, a lot of user interviews, because the way it worked when I was there, shout out Designation, we each got like a project. There was a group of like, we broke down in the groups of 3, and then we had a project where we essentially found an app or some company that was looking for a design upgrade, and we're essentially we're doing this boot camp, we'll do it for free, we'll do like the testing and figure out your design pain points, or at least try to, as amateur designers, so that you can move forward and maybe go do a redesign or something like that. So that was a lot of the focus, and then that was like the second half of the program, and the first half was like people from studios talking about different parts of the design landscape coming in, like how do you set up these user interviews, like what should you be looking for, like how do you design your questions, like don't ask leading questions, just try to observe and be objective about the answers that you're getting. And then that's the other thing too, because we have so many different types of users taking all that information and like, all right, with all this information, all these different tendencies from different types of people, how do we push that into a final design that everybody will use? Yeah,
which is a challenge, always the challenge, right? Like, who is everybody, and like, should everybody even use it? I don't know, maybe not. Like, I think about people who inspire me, like Brian Harrington. He's like going in to these places, like, I don't know, like offering the conversation about Bitcoin in a really non-aggressive way, just like doing the education, like in the streets going. I feel like that's where it needs to start, right? When we talk about merchants or designing for people, it's like, well, who are you designing for? Start locally, start with your community, have good relationships with them so they can be honest with you. They don't feel like they need to hold back. They can be like, actually, this is broken. I'm not interested, maybe in a couple of years. Yeah, so I feel like for me, it's like, I'm not so interested in like, I don't feel like I have to have this overwhelming sense of we have to build for like the entire, I think it has to start locally and small first, right? And like, that's how you get really great quality experiences and then move out, right? And it's gonna look so different, right? In like Ghana than it's gonna look in the US or, you know, that it's gonna look in, you know, Ireland, wherever, right? Like everybody is gonna have different needs. So I don't think it makes sense, at least for me, to be like, we need to like build this perfect thing for everyone because and it's also not gonna be relevant in like 5 years. Like it changes. You gotta keep up. You gotta stay relevant and listen to people. Exactly what you're saying. Listen.
No, that's the other thing. It's funny you brought that up. It's gonna be like different parts of like local Bitcoin. This is a perfect example of that where it was designed for like meet in person, cash for Bitcoin. But you found that like people around the world found a way to like hack it to create like a remittance tool using gift cards and stuff like that.
I want to learn so much more about like how design could help that. I feel like in a place like Africa, like, or even the US, like people who are unbanked use gift cards all the time. And like, why aren't we talking about that? Right. Continue. I totally interrupted you.
No, I mean, it's...
I'm like interrupting you constantly.
No, stop. You can interrupt me as much as you want. And you're really not even interrupting or adding to the conversation, which is like, yeah, like again, like it just highlights again, that was for local Bitcoins. I would view that as like something where they designed a sidewalk in a park and like people are just like walking off path, like with the gift card stuff. And like, how do you let that happen? As a company, I think they've done a great job of it. Personally, like, yeah, like that's the beauty of Bitcoin too. Like it's so raw, it's so new. We're still finding out every day how people interact with it. And then I guess that's a good question for you. Is like as somebody designing for open source software, like you said, things are changing rapidly. Like how do you not get frustrated at that, or what are the base principles from which you grow upon and say like, all right, if we just get it right at this base layer, everything can naturally like grow on there. Is that a perspective you have on it, or?
I mean, I think that's something that takes a while to accept about open source design. That's different than maybe like traditional design where you're going into a studio or you're going into work in-house at like a large company. It takes time. You got to be patient. There's a lot of frustrations. And I feel like just understanding it's like you can have deadlines that you expect to happen. You can be frustrated that things are changing, or you can just try to like enjoy it and sit back and say, how can I help you? And I think the communication, just being really in sync with people and being like, we're going to do our weekly meetings. Everyone come to the meeting, because you have to accept that open source is going to have, even like Bitcoin Core, right? It doesn't look like the most beautiful code. And it's not because people can't code well. You get all these different people who have had jobs beforehand in other places, or maybe they just learned to code by themselves and they come together to make something great. And I think it's like that with design too. It's like you can't expect that you're gonna have like a release date that's gonna always, I mean, we have good people like Pavlinex on board who like manage us and keep us together, but open source takes time, and you have to accept that there are things that are gonna change and just roll with it and have that really open attitude that I think Bitcoiners have been good about kind of keeping with. At least folks who stay with Bitcoin and you know aren't selling. I think they kind of just accept that like things are gonna change. You just stay with it, do the software updates, try to educate yourself, listen to these podcasts.
Right.
What do you do? Like, what do you do to keep up with the relevance? I mean, you run a pod. Like, what do you?
Well, this helps me.
Yeah.
The newsletter helps. But then, like, even then, like I mentioned Blue Wallet earlier, I still have a Blue Wallet with like a rep segment address. I'm sorry, freaks. Like, I haven't even like, I think for me, like, if you had like a user persona that was Marty Bent, I'm a lazy.
I think a lot of people are. I'm lazy in ways too. I don't think just because you design or code or whatever, like people break rules all the time. They're very naughty. I do a lot of naughty things I shouldn't do on these apps, but you know that's okay. I think also just like not judging people too. Like part of it is like if you want honest answers, like be okay if people are lazy.
Yeah, I'm a lazy user. I just like
that's fine.
I want. That's what like people are like, oh, you're not testing this, you're not testing that. It's like for me, for my Bitcoin experience, like I have things that just work and they have worked and I like that they work. And
it's a little dangerous, but I'm reckless too in that same way. And you can't test everything. That's the thing. I think that's why, you know, we have to really be grateful for people who are in these open source projects, it's like they make it a point to test things because people like you and I sometimes drop the ball, or like, you know, it's realistic. You have families, you have obligations. It's like the holidays, like things come up. But like the groups of people who are really going to keep us together and like push Bitcoin forward, I think, are the people who are doing this things and like making companies that are creating these projects be like, hey, can we help you? What do you need testing with? Do you want feedback? If not, like, that's okay. But if you do, we can get you to a design review. Like Connor runs those too, which is like so good. So I would encourage anybody who's like creating wallets or wants feedback, reach out to the design community.
And they in the Slack, right? And
I think either Slack or there's like a calendar that you can add to your Gmail or whatever. If you don't use Gmail, that's okay too. But you can integrate it with some pretty standard options. So that's thanks to people like Christoph, Daniel, who like are so good at making sure that we keep it together and are organized.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm fascinated by this too. Like, so what is the vibe in the Slack?
I like that you're really into it, Marty. I didn't expect you to be so into like.
Well, it's important.
Love it. I love
it's
it.
important. Like design is extremely important. Like you can.
Obviously, I think so, but I think with Bitcoin too. Like I wish that there was more of this like unified presence of people who are like programming and people who are like designing and doing it together in tandem and kind of like I feel like to me design came later than other things. And I wish like you were talking about the intentionality earlier before we like came on, like making design intentional. I mean, I don't think when people were writing like the white paper, they really thought of it. I don't think Satoshi didn't have design in mind. Obviously, so much is really you can tell that it was intentional, but in terms of like the visuals, interaction, product, like I so wish that it was like flowing in a different way, which we can work on.
Core devs don't take any offense to this, but your protocol developers really don't have any design sense. At least the ones that I've talked to and met. Like you have good protocol design sense, but when it comes to like aesthetics and user experience, I mean the Bitcoin Core GUI. Many people will yell, it's a perfectly fine like user experience.
There's so much drama on that.
Yeah.
There's like two people who will like die on that hill that it's like perfect. And you're like, maybe we could improve on a few things.
Mr. Hodl, I hear you out there.
But I respect people too, like who have strong opinions. I'm not going to tell, like, I feel like that's such a good thing in open source. It's like, it's not your job to tell people they're wrong, but like consider all the different opinions. And like, maybe I am wrong. Like, tell me what's good about it. Like, what am I missing? Maybe you see something that I don't. That's like incredible.
Well, from your perspective, what are like some of the most common, or maybe not even the most common, but some of the biggest design mistakes that companies are?
Oh yeah, I get there. We're doing Vietnamese coffee today. I think the common design mistakes are just. Oh, you gotta take off the top. Gotta take off the top there.
Whoa.
Cheers, guys. So
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So. By the way, this is Try Hard Coffee. Shout out to Willow Byrne for introducing me in Austin, East Austin.
Will, you got to come back on the pod. And you got to get back in Bitcoin, Will. I was telling you on Thursday. It's time.
Well, Bake Boy, were you here for PlebFi? I'll answer the question later. But like, he did Bake Boy. Did you see that?
Yeah, he just got some Tacovas. I saw him and Parker Lewis were getting boots for him winning.
Yeah, I did. Ooh, yeah, let me get in that. So you were saying, what are some of the biggest, like, most common mistakes or hurdles? Was that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, it's like when I talk to people and I ask, like, okay, well, what do the users think of this? I think there's honestly not much of a dialogue. Cheers, between the people who are using their products. I think some people get really excited about finishing a project that sometimes they don't always like. They're always trying to do the next release, right? Yeah. Oh, thank you. You don't want a top off car? Get in their car. But yeah, I think in terms of common mistakes, it's honestly just learning from the users. I think, like, of course there are principles and UX things, and sometimes you're looking at that like, why is that an alien logo there? Like, I don't know if you've seen that on like Breeze, or like people are like, what's going on with that? And maybe there is an intention, right? Like there's small things where you're like, why is that like typeface an option? I can hardly read that. But I think most commonly it's just talking to users and like listening. If they give you support feedback, implementing that.
And how do you do that easily for somebody building an application, or do you have
easily? There's no easy in Bitcoin. No, I mean, I hope that.
What do you have? Like, is it something as simple as like a support page? Like, hey, we'd like your feedback to learn, or do you do like, hey, like if you're willing, we'll give you 10,000 sats if you do a 20-minute video conference with us and just show us how you go through your like, how do you?
I think people are incentivized by like bounties and like some sort of payoff, but I think it's honestly like so much work to give really good feedback. Because that requires users not just to talk about their experience, but to really go through a whole app if you want to get like quality feedback. Yeah, I think making it available. I've noticed a lot of apps, and maybe this is just because I give too many support requests that are like unsolicited, and people are like, "What are you doing?" But yeah, people like don't always have an area where you can email them, or you do, and you get like a really boilerplate thing where they're like, "Thanks for reaching out," and like never hear from them again. I don't think that's any specific person's problem. I think that it's because open source requires so much time and energy, and like everyone's got to keep the lights on, and not everybody can support themselves with that lifestyle. It's like you never know where your next paycheck is coming from. So maybe some of these things where it's like you don't have VCs behind it or you don't have money behind it, like I could see where that's harder, but maybe having communities that like jump in and offer help.
Yeah. And then
It's a
even
good
beyond
thing.
that, like are these open source applications or software projects at a disadvantage compared to like closed source iPhone apps? Because can't you get like a much more data from those? Like literally, like you can get like a heat map of where people are clicking on the screen, and then
Yeah, and I mean,
redesign that way.
totally, but that can also be problematic too, because sometimes it's that they're like stuck on something, and that's why they're doing it. And it's like if you're just looking at it from that perspective, and not like, as you said, like zooming out or looking at different lenses, you might only see that and be like, oh, look at how often they're using that. They're just tapping away at that icon. It's because it like doesn't work, or you get things wrong. So I think that's why having these conversations, or part of it could be too, like culturally. That's why I say like we should be starting local, and people shouldn't expect to have answers for other communities. I think they should listen and learn from them, because if we've never been in like Sweden, like I may not know their needs, or if you're in China, like there's restrictions. Like honestly, like they may have completely different needs on like an app. It might not just be like it being simple and usable and people understand it, it's intuitive. They may need like other features that we hadn't predicted or we hadn't thought about in, I don't know, an app we use in California, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, they're definitely going to need it to be designed with a certain language. That's the other thing too, like language, like
Yeah.
communicating like what your app does. That language, like if you're building an app as a Westerner and then you're trying to take it somewhere else in the world, like
It's like not applicable. They're like
the
that.
verbiage that you use isn't
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
makes sense over there, and it's like, all right, how do we do that?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's why I like really value what like cars doing too. Like I think audio is so underappreciated, but also things like copywriters. Like we have people I think from visual design backgrounds. Often when I talk to them, I'm like, oh, what's your, how'd you learn about this? It's usually like someone went to school or they started like coding on their own. But I think what you say matters so much, and how you say it and understand it. And you can't know how to talk to everyone. You've never lived every place, but having people who are copywriters and have done this well, like would be so amazing to have more of those, or people who understand like audio or layout or editorial, like what's the best way to say what we need to say in a simple way that's like really effective. And so I think that's one thing that we could always improve on. If I was to say like, what is one thing that I think could really benefit Bitcoin open source design, like having great copywriters. I would love to see more. Maybe that's on us for like not appreciating them enough. Maybe we need to recruit them and just be like, hey, open invitation. Here's what we do. I don't know. I feel like with designers too, like people know about Bitcoin, but I don't feel like it's always so inviting, or like you don't feel appreciated where people are like, no, we're focused on core. And you're like, okay, that's cool. Like do you, but I think we could be a little bit better about like
Yeah.
getting people in, who are really good and talented.
Well, that's like, and again, I have shout out Yazin, who owns MSTQ, which is UX UI design. He's been getting more into Bitcoin, and like I'm really excited because he's a really good UX designer, and like that's the way I pitch it to him. And like as Bitcoiners, I think we want more designers. Again, we desperately need better design. We need people who design with intention and can make it easy to onboard your grandma or your technically illiterate cousin without and onto Bitcoin and be able to use it in a self-sovereign way. And so we need good designers. And the way I pitched it to Yazin was just like, dude, like as a designer, like if you want to leave your mark on the world, you want to create primitives of interacting with a new type of technology, like Bitcoin is that, again, that wide open canvas. Like as a designer, I would be chomping at the bit to get in to design experiences in Bitcoin, because you could literally make an impression that lasts decades, centuries, however long, just for creating user flows today that become the the norm for the people of the future.
We need more advocates like you, Marty. If only every pitch was like that. I think it's so true, though. And I think if we approached it from that sort of like appreciative perspective, not just with designers, but with like a lot of people who give their time and talents to Bitcoin, I think we'd see much different products. I don't know, maybe it's just because we're all a little neurotic and obsessive and trying to learn so much all at once, and we don't slow down to just really like be grateful for the work that people are doing and understand what people could bring to the table. Like, everyone has a different gift, and I think if we were to embrace like backgrounds and traditional disciplines that are not like specific to like programming, core, lightning, which matter a lot. I don't want to be talking shit on that either. Like, they are so important in their own way. So if you are like a developer and you are doing that, that's amazing. But I also think just that sweet spot of having people who like understand and appreciate Bitcoin, but also have their own talent that's not already utilized in the space. Like, I look forward to that in the upcoming years. When I think about like, I don't know, people pitch like 2030 all the time. They're like, oh, we're going to have like, everyone's going to blame Bitcoiners for problems. It's like, I want to focus less on that and like, who's playing here? Who's like contributing, and who, like, what does it look like? What do we open on our phone or laptop or whatever? Like, how do I approach going to get like my local grocer or butcher or wherever? Like, what is that experience like? And I think that goes beyond just design. It's like, how are you living and how are you appreciating your quality of life?
Yeah. And that's one thing, actually, now that you say that, thinking about the coffee shop I go to. Shout out to Wendy at Maha Coffee and Kat and everybody there.
Do they listen to the pod? Should we send the pod to them?
Wendy might be listening. She's told me that she's going to start listening. So Wendy.
Ooh, is she BTC Pay server yet?
No, not yet. Well, that's the other thing. No, like, I'm not sure.
She's got to be open to it.
I
interrupted
think
you.
she's open a bit. Well, that's the thing I'm trying to. That's the point. Like, so I just got obsessed with like NFC payments, just like tap to pay. I didn't know I could do it with my cash card until like 6 months ago, and I was like, oh my god, everywhere I want to tap. Like, and that was like, so bringing this back to like Bitcoin design, like Rodolfo and CoinKite, they're designing a new version of the cold card with NFC tap payments for PSBTs, but like. And then again, like, so I would like to go to Maha Coffee and like have an NFC tap where I'm able to pay in Bitcoin or Lightning or something like that. And then again, you get into the trade-offs, like, is that safe? Is that secure? How much Bitcoin do you hold on that wallet? If there are security trade-offs, and what's it? Is it even possible? Number one, to create an experience like that, but. I think it is possible, and I think it does need to be like that if we want like people using Lightning specifically as like day-to-day transactions.
100%. And I think those are important things to consider personally for each individual using it. Like, what do you want to give up? You can't have it all, which is like really sad. But I don't know if you can relate to this. Do you feel like you're ever like really existential in any way? Not hopeful for the future and not like optimistic, but you just think about like, why are we here? What are we doing? Like,
all the time.
Yeah. So for me, like, I don't know if it's like just getting there, and I don't know. People are really quick to point out like flaws in Bitcoin, like, oh, like you have to watch out, which is valid. All the points you brought up are valid, but I think about it too, where I'm like, the systems we're already using are so flawed and problematic. I can't be like, well, it's okay, I'll just use my credit card. Have we not thought about like, I mean, people talk about all the time being tracked in the digital age. Like, you can already have, I mean, half of these banks have already been hacked. Like, I was in the Equifax thing. I'm pretty sure most Americans lost. Yeah, so it's like, of course, you can always like point out, and I think we should think about those things with like, how do we improve? But if we're just gonna like live in fear and be like, well, if I buy that coffee, it's over now. It's like, of course you want to like be cognizant and like, don't show people that you have so much in your wallet, or, you know, like have these experiences that you learn and you improve it. But I think when people are like really quick to be negative and bring that energy to the table, I'm like, I think in my head, I'm like, we could go that other route too with like our current systems that exist. And I think they would be much darker. If we were to really sit down and like write out pros and cons, I don't think the list would be worse for Bitcoin than it is for our current system.
Oh, easily. And that mentality is defeat us. Like, we should want to design like the most impeccable, seamless experience.
We can, and people are working on it.
And but like the people out there, like, oh, it'll never happen. Like, you're not letting it happen. You're not even letting, like, with that mindset. Like,
you have to be open, and you have to try. Otherwise, it's like you're relying on other people to do the hard work, and that's not fair either. If we all want to benefit from it, I think everyone can do their own little part. And that even could be as simple as like, I think people are like, well, I'm not a designer. I can't really contribute to the design community. But like, I don't know, can you translate? Can you like tell me about your experience? Like, what was it like? Can you even like 5 bullet points on a doc or like your notes or whatever? Like that is valuable. Everybody can bring something to the table, I think. So
it's something as simple as a screenshot or maybe like a recorded video of you like using an app and like posting it to Twitter. So like, hey, I'm using this app and here's where I had a problem.
it matters. It totally matters. So I think it is about perspective a lot too. And I think that's what I enjoy about Bitcoiners and maybe about designers or people who are working on open source. It's like, they're more curious. Like I feel like with you, you know, you can like admit that you're like lazy and it's like okay to be like a little bit comfortable with people. But, and I think that that idea of not having to be perfect and just being open is so much healthier than just being negative and be like, well, there's all these issues. It's like, yeah, we know. We understand there's issues. That's why we're trying to make it better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's subjective. You're going to have lazy users. You're going to have
Of
people
course.
who just like get into your app and like, what the hell am I doing? Like you're going to have hardcore users like Matt Odell. You're going to have everybody in between on the spectrum. Like again, you have to design to some extent for all those users, for the lazy user, for the technically savvy, like super cypherpunk who wants to use Tor and do coin selection and do like timing analysis of their transaction sends and all that stuff, and just creating the facilities through which each user can be as lazy or as James Bondy as they want to is important.
Yeah, totally. And also like we're talking about identity and NIMs and things like that as well. Like just even something as simple as like identity and making sure people feel comfortable and there's trust and you're transparent with what you're doing. I think, of course, there's different personas and use cases, but designing for that too and having people share in their own way, which I think is like the valuable thing about what you do with this podcast. It's you have different types of people and they share their experiences. And like maybe you don't need to listen to every episode, but if you can be like, oh, well, I'm really interested in this person's perspective, people can just jump to it and learn about that. Yeah. Or like this person's working on this project, like, okay, let's like listen to that one again. So I think different ways of documenting work is helpful to designers. And I hope to people who are like creating these apps too, with less of a design background, but maybe they're open to learning and maybe they just want to learn from podcasts, from books, from the internet. Like having more mediums of exchange is I think, something I'm excited about.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier, like, you know, people don't even learn about design, but then like when you mentioned that before we hit record too, like the different mediums through which people learn. Like I taught everything I learned in college to myself on YouTube. Like I could not sit there in a lecture and actually listen without wanting to blow my brains out. I stopped going to class and just started teaching myself on YouTube and going and taking the midterms and finals. And
I feel like that's more common than not, though. When you talk to people and you really like get vulnerable, like most people, I think, and this is not to say like don't go to school or drop out, but like I've met so many people just like growing up in the Bay Area where they're just like school did not work for me, like it did not, but like they would exit 3 companies at like 18, and I'd be like, so obviously there's like different ways that people learn. I mean, we know this, but like, how do we make Bitcoin that for people? How do we make sure that like design and Bitcoin is like translated in ways that meet people where they are, right? So like the kid like Marty who like learns on YouTube, it's like, how are we getting that information to them?
Yeah, and is it good information? That's the other thing too.
Is it honest information? Yeah.
That's the other thing. There's so much noise out there. Like, in terms of like, you can go on YouTube and you can find a lot about Bitcoin. A lot of it is bad.
Yeah, or the opposite narrative too, right? Where people saying, "Oh, this is." How many days of the week do you have a new headline where it's like, "This is destroying the world"? And,
7.
Right. So it's making sure that like people learn in those ways, and I don't know, just continuing to improve on whatever the most relevant medium is. Like maybe I actually think like audio is so intimate, like so. Maybe it's for some people it's YouTube. Maybe for me it's just like listening to something and going on a walk and being in nature or whatever. Like everybody's different.
That, and like as I described my college experience, I thought like it was like that for like all my math and economics and in the numbers types classes. But when it was a philosophy class, I loved to go in person because it was a discussion. It was like you learn about Sartre and Aristotle, Plato, you go through Nietzsche, and like then you want to be there to actually like, all right, what the fuck did I just read? And, like, what are we trying to? So that like that way of learning, of conversational in person after having done some heavy reading, I enjoyed as well. But when it came to like economics and stuff, I was like, no, okay, I'm gonna go to Khan Academy and do this. Yeah, it's like, again, like a user with different mediums by which he learns for different types of subjects, which is like that's why I love the podcast. I learn a lot on this because it's just
It's great.
conversations.
It's great.
I'm not, but I'm not learning like supply demand curves and stuff like that. And so I'm more willing to have conversations like this and be engaged. I'm just ranting about my life now. I'm really like,
I feel like Marty was a designer in a past life. You were like some sort of Renaissance, like chiseling away for 30 years straight, like trying to get like the perfect
I wish
angle.
I'm trying to
creating inks.
I've actually thought about forcing my son to become a sculptor. Like they're all gone, son. You're gonna be the best sculptor.
Or like a
of the
carpenter.
21st.
I feel like those like trades so valuable. So valuable.
That's what we actually have. My sister's living with us, and we've got
Nice.
we got a ceramics wheel in the back. She makes pottery.
So cool.
So if anybody needs plates, my sister will make them. Plates, mugs, vases.
Is she accepting Bitcoin?
Well, yes, she
Well,
is. She
there
is.
we go. Got to put her on the BTC Pay server list. We have a list of people who, if you're interested in like accepting Bitcoin, you can find those really easily. And I think there's actually like a lot of people too. I have to admit, like a lot of social media really bothers me, but I do feel like one thing in terms of merchants and like learning from them, like Twitter is great. People, especially like Afghani refugees and people who are like on the ground in Afghanistan, like they're really into Bitcoin. I've felt, at least from the Twitter like feed that I have. It's like, yeah, finding people who are like artists and designers and like makers, or who are like, I want to sell saffron. Like that is so cool to me. Where I'm like, yeah, let's just do it. Like straight to you. We don't need a middleman. Like we'll figure it out. You have your craft. I have mine. Like how do we support each other? And maybe they don't want Bitcoin. Maybe they want cash. Either way, like
Well,
how do we find them?
Let's dive into that. Who have you found, and what have the conversations exactly been like?
Well, they've been very different. So I tried at first, my first step was to approach merchants who were already doing BTC Pay. I didn't tell them what was going on. I just wanted to like buy something from most of them or all of them. Anyone who I could get to. We're in the pandemic. I'm in the US. I can't be in certain parts of Asia right now, or places are closed off. I wish I could just travel there, and but I couldn't. So Evolve Wine is great. I don't know if you've ever bought wine from them. They accept
so.
Bitcoin. I think they're definitely in the Bay Area. I want to say like the Peninsula area. I'd have to look it up, but really cool, lovely people. And I've bought wine in the past. It was like totally flawless experience. And this time, I could tell they got into Lightning because it was like a month, and I was like, what's going on? Like, I actually had it sent to like the HRF conference to like the hotel room, and I was like, these haven't gotten here by now. Maybe we should follow up. And so sweet. Like, the thing is though, for them, I noticed like they thought it went to their Lightning wallet. It went to their on-chain. Actually paid with Cash App because I was like, let me just like keep this all circular economy. Yeah, it's on-chain when they do on-chain fees, and so they were accepting Lightning. They were expecting that anyone anymore, because Lightning is so like adopted and people are into it. They're like, oh, we didn't get any Lightning transaction the past weeks. You didn't do it. You didn't fulfill this. And you're like, no, you have to kind of like let them know there's multiple wallets. And everyone's been so nice, but I feel like we learn together too. Like the merchants are learning and I'm learning, and unfortunately they just like refunded it, and I was like, no, I want you to. So we'll have to buy more wine. We'll have to have like an Austin Evolve night. But yeah, also it's just been great too. Like I feel like activists, I consider them merchants too. I think maybe in most people's mind, like it's like getting that coffee or like going for a burger or whatever. But like I think activists are like also people who are like doing nonprofits and they're doing initiatives on their own. So when we were at the HRF conference, also Freedom Forum, me and Rockstar, we helped set up Belarus Free Theater, and the women there do like incredible work too. So I think people who are actually in the nonprofit space are getting super creative with like how they support their initiatives and what's required, I think, to work politically, and not in an evil way, but it's just like we're in different jurisdictions. Like, what do you need to do to be compliant, and also accept Bitcoin the way that you want? That makes sense.
Yeah, it's, again, especially like the Belarus example, right? Like they were using Bitcoin to basically give people who are getting cut off from their banking system money to buy food and shit, right? With that,
that's a different group. But yeah, I mean, there were so many fascinating at that Oslo Freedom Forum in Miami. We didn't go to the one in Oslo, but apparently in May. So if anybody wants to go in May, I guess that's the next Oslo Freedom Forum. But yeah, there's so many fascinating examples. People, that is one, and also what what the woman who I was working with and we were helping her set up her instance, which she told me was really fast. Actually, she said it in front of everybody at the Bitcoin Academy. She's saying, like, I don't know what to do when we have like dictatorships who are buying Bitcoin or they're mining or they're able to get access to a lot more of this than people would even make in a week or month. There's no way we could catch up because they get so little, I think it's like a few $100s. Meanwhile, the government has acquired so much more Bitcoin. And that's not to say, like, no one has a chance to buy Bitcoin out there. It's just you have to choose between, like, feeding your family, or you have to choose between, like, buying some Bitcoin. It's not always as easy as people make it seem. Like, just accept Bitcoin for your just accept it for your nonprofit. It's like, it's not that easy. So
yeah, especially people who live in a paycheck to paycheck. It's like, all right, you can't just like thrust that into
or fixed income or
yeah.
anything. Yeah,
it's especially when you consider the volatility of Bitcoin too. That's what I mean.
Can't be like, just smash by 200. They're like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a ton of money for them. Yeah. And I do understand that too. It's like conflicting when she's like, well, we know that like things that the governments are doing, like we don't agree with, but like, how can we, and I don't know if there's an answer for that when you're designing. I think like the policy part is super fascinating too. I can't wait to see more people. This is another, if we're getting into like all my dreams, like I would love to see more people in policy. Like we're going to need it for sure. We already need it, but I would love to see like just people who are so articulate with reading and writing and how they speak, to just be standing up and helping, in their own communities too, not just in the US, but in their own communities.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not articulate, but my policy.
You are articulate.
My policy would just be just let people Bitcoin and leave them alone. Don't tax them.
Well,
try not to trace them.
I wish everyone agreed with that. But,
I do too.
But,
I realize
that's where the work comes in, right? That's where we do the work. And that's kind of what I was talking about, like these poetic qualities too. It's like it's not always like a didactic thing where you're just like, okay, like what if we worked out how we would do politics and like where's the roadmap here? It's like sometimes it needs to be more creative and subtle. And sometimes I think it requires like just reaching people, like, and I think politicians too, on like a very intimate level and being like, this is how we feel and like this is why it's important to us, and having that sort of emotional connection. And I know some people are psychopaths and you're never going to reach them, but like I think when we like go so hard and we're like, no, like this is why it's good, like don't you get it? Like it's just not effective, right? You have to have this like, which I think some people have that gift of like being able to speak with people and connect, and I want so many of those people in Bitcoin. I want them so badly to just like show up.
Yeah.
And make those connections, because I think we need that to just be like, hey, like, respect your opinion, but here's where we're coming from.
Yeah, especially like after the last couple of weeks, we've seen Hillary Clinton come out and say that cryptocurrencies are going to destabilize the dollar and countries at that. You have that dude Dave Troy is coming out, Alex Gladstein, saying,
Alex, we love Alex.
Saying he's trying to.
Who isn't coming at Alex? I feel like every week he has like another
He's
person.
the nicest guy too. Yeah. It's like, leave Alex alone. You Brittany meme out of this. Leave Alex alone.
I do feel like that sometimes when people pick on like people, politically or on Twitter or whatever, like they just know they're very well meaning and nonviolent, and they just like go at them. So
yeah. But we have like again from like a policy perspective, we have people coming out and calling Bitcoin fascist and a natural destabilizer of currencies and governments. Which is like, it's the opposite. Bitcoin exist. Bitcoin's not fascist. Obviously, it's opt-in. Like fascists can use Bitcoin, but the protocol itself is not fascist. Maybe it's fascist in the sense that it like puts very strict rules that you have to follow, and if you don't, your transactions don't get propagated. But now we're getting to semantics argument.
So I think that's like where design might come in from a different, like, unobvious thing where you're like thinking, oh, it's just about UX, it's just about UX. But it's like, how do you actually like create those conversations and opportunities to connect with people? Because I think some people, they cling to their favorite like athlete or like celebrity or whatever. Like you see it when like rappers start like adopting Bitcoin or whatever like altcoin it is. Or it's like, oh yeah, this is great. Like they said it's great. Like same thing with politicians. I feel like people are like, oh yeah, Hillary said that. Yeah, like or Warren or whatever. There's like, let's do it. So how do you connect with people who just believe, whatever their favorite is saying, or how do you like connect? I think that's design too. It's not just the app. It's not just the internet. It's not just Bitcoin, but in terms of like social, like socioeconomic values and just finding people who maybe hadn't challenged their perspective before.
Yeah. And then being delicate to approach it with intention for their particular worldview, right? Like, all right, we've got We've got a progressive, Hillary-loving voter who just saw her scream, "Bitcoin's evil. It's going to destroy the world." How do we go to that person and be like, "All right,
Human to human.
I know you love Hillary, but I think she may be wrong here."
Still okay to love Hillary if that's where you're at. No one's saying don't love Hillary, but let's challenge some points. Like, I think with anything, if you're just flat out believing everything someone says, like, we gotta work on that, right? But it's no one's saying don't love your favorite politician. No one's saying, like, if that's how you really feel, then I can accept that there's some things they might like, and you have to, right? You have to accept people for who they are.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like the truth is the truth, right? Like, you don't want to be dishonest with people.
Well, this is why, like, I think the work that it's combining your work around Bitcoin, like BTC Pay Server, HRF particularly, are providing us Bitcoiners with the not rhetorical tools, but the ammo to go combat some of these people who have a fundamental misunderstanding, like the NSARS movement, how those women got cut off from their bank accounts.
Not even just the women, the feminist coalition, like, spearheaded it, but there were more than the women getting cut off. They were just the ones to be like, let's go, let's do it.
Yeah. And like
which I love. I'm like, get creative, go.
That story that, like, they were able to get cut off from their bank accounts and spin up BTC Pay Server and receive Bitcoin donations from people around the world within the course of days.
Amazing.
Like, that highlights the power. You go to that Hillary voter, like, you like women's rights, don't you? Like, Bitcoin literally, and I'm not going to say it saved, but it helped this feminist movement in a dark time for them, where
focus on what you have in common, for sure. And I don't want to be the person who's like telling people what to do or how to think or whatever, because I can totally accept that people have different political views, and I think that's really amazing, and I don't want to change people. I think, like, that's one thing where I'm like, I don't want to push design on people and be like, well, do you know, like, this is actually a better experience for X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, let's talk about it, because maybe I'll learn something too. Like, maybe I've found something I misunderstood, but I doubt it's going to be about Bitcoin. But maybe I'll learn something from you too. I don't think coming at it like, let me educate you. Like, that's not always like the right move either. I think that's why having those people who are so articulate, who understand the conversation and can kind of be very level-headed about it too. You like can kind of sense someone's energy, and if they're calm, you're like, okay, I can approach you. But if someone's like going hard, like a meme, you're like, you are so aggressive right now. I just really don't even want to interact.
I had a moment of weakness last week. I was at this oil and gas conference, and some guy was just sitting next to me and just giving me, like, all the run of the mill, like, Bitcoin's too slow, the government's gonna ban it, it's too expensive, it's using too much energy, and I was just like getting, like, physically triggered and, like, trying to respond to everything, and I, like, had a reflective moment later. Then I was like, just gotta have a better approach.
Who wins there, right?
Yeah.
No one wins there. Yeah. Right.
It was just like, well, it's slow and dumb for a reason. It does use a lot of energy, but it's good because we're using shredded energy, and we had the Lightning Network, so it could be medium exchange, price volatility. Like, it's just,
So, Marty, you're wearing your 1031 hat. Some listeners may know what this is. From a design perspective, do you guys have someone representing design? How do people learn if they're trying to, like, get their next open source, or not even open source, like, if you're going to do a business. I'm here for everything. Like, who do they approach for, like, a design specialty? Like, who's their individual on the team? If they're like, hey, we don't even really know where to turn, we need some help, can they go to 1031 and, like, reach out to you? Or who do they, like, contact? Who's, like, the design person on that team?
I mean, we haven't designated yet, but I'm going to put my hand up. I will be the design
I'll help you out if you
person.
want help. I think that people would love to. I mean, that intentionality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's, I like to think I have enough knowledge of the design space to be dangerous, to know how to evaluate apps, software, whatever it may be, to have a hunch, an inclination of whether or not it was designed in a way in which users will get it intuitively. Yeah, I mean, if you have any design questions or need help in the design community and want 1031's help, you can DM me, certainly.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, like, we have this conversation, everyone goes their separate ways. It's like a great time, but it's like, where do we go from here? And I think about things like Summer of Bitcoin or mentorship, or, I mean, I'm happy if anybody's, like, doing a project, like, please, like, we would love to have you, like, on Slack or getting reviews, but I just want people to feel like they can always like reach out if they want help, because people do need design help.
Yeah.
Just like people would need help like creating an app if they didn't know how to do that. Like not everyone knows Swift, and that's okay. Like go to someone who can help you with that.
Yeah.
So like giving people who listen to this the resources is something like, I don't know the answer to that, but like how do we make sure that people are connected in the way they need to?
I think Bitcoin Design Guide is a great start. I mean,
and if you're a merchant, come see me. I wanna get your perspective.
Well, what do you think? Like, how did that come to be? How, like, because I know there was like.
I'm sorry, which one? Bitcoin Design?
Yeah.
Well, I think for a long time there were people who were interested in Bitcoin, but there wasn't a specific community for it. Steve Lee, I think, deserves a lot of credit, and people at Square Crypto in general for just like stepping up and being supportive of design in this space. But I think there were a lot of designers who kind of were on the outskirts or working at larger companies and maybe felt like they couldn't leave their job. Like it wasn't as if, chain code existed for people to do a residency and like get some help and maybe get a little funding to get started if you were like in a different industry and you wanted to get into Bitcoin and you were capable and you're like, oh, I want to do Core, Lightning. Those avenues existed for a while, but I don't think there was anything specific where it's like, well, I'm a designer and maybe I've worked at whatever large company or at a studio or I've just been freelancing. People didn't really have a place to go, and I think they deserve a lot of credit, this community, for going to places like the Figma conference, like and just going to config and speaking or trying to find ways where it's like there was like an MIT hackathon and it's like people just showed up and they're like, it's our team. There weren't designers there, so I really love that they're just taking chances, and I think that the people who created it, Steve, I think Daniel was one of the initial people. Christoph is just our like sensei. He like knows everything. He's holding us together. And I would love to see more too. That's something Christoph and I think are going to be working on in the near future, is trying to get more people to create these little sub-communities that support and fund Bitcoin design. It shouldn't just be one, and it shouldn't just be Square, and it shouldn't just be one Slack channel. Like I hope that there's more in the future, in the same way that there's all these other groups that are working on Bitcoin projects, right? Whether it be building a wallet, whether it be education, whether it be Unchained, whatever it is. Like there's so many creative ways to go about Bitcoin. I think the design aspect, as you said, there's just opportunity. I really want people to just find their own way, and hopefully me and Christoph can help create that for some people in the upcoming year. That's a goal.
Yeah,
an optimistic goal, maybe too ambitious, but
no, I don't think
now
so.
that I've said it, we're gonna do it.
I don't think that's too ambitious. So I guess
we need more than, if you have like one way to kill a project, like it shouldn't just be one thing. Like we need 4 or 5. I would love to see like 10 of these, but even if we had 2 or 3, like that's better than like one.
Well, that begs the question. Maybe we can like a new
let's get into
program
it.
for graphic design, but again, are there?
Yeah.
A big word in the crypto community, are there like base layer primitives in design that like you maybe don't need different sources of information, because we can all agree that here's the primitives of Bitcoin design and what you need to take into consideration.
That's a design guide, yeah. Here are best practices.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means you have to like scrap those if you're doing something else. It just means like, how do we build on that, right? Like, okay, well now we have the design guide. Like now what? Like, okay, well maybe there's more communities who could do that. Maybe there's like Summer of Bitcoin, and you like help younger people. Or, there's like this girl who comes to BitDubs who I'm so into. She's like 16. She like so wants to be in design, like really wants to go. And like her dad comes with her. I'm like, yes, I wish I had this when I was her age. And like getting people like that excited and like introduced in a way where, this book, I brought it and I was telling Marty, is like, I was thinking of this podcast. I was rereading this recently. It came out a couple years ago, but there are people who are teaching in higher education who do these courses over, and lectures for several years. And it's like, how do you condense that into something that's simple? And what he did was he had a workshop. I think this one was in LA, and people just came for the workshop, and someone documented the workshop and put it into this book. So I think there are ways to kind of like recreate education, iterate on traditions, and like make sure that people know there's like, we evolve, and like the things that were relevant before and the ways we learned before, I hope, are not staying the same. That's something I worry about too, where I'm like, why are we doing the same thing? Like with like politics and stuff, I'm like, it's so crazy. And some of these things, we're still doing this. And like banking, right? It's like traditional banking. Like I don't know what it's like to be in a hedge fund. I can't imagine it's great, but I can think of the frustration of people who like are smart enough to get like that, like, why are we still doing these same things when the world has changed? Like, we should be improving and making the best. We have the best money possible. Let's do something with it. So I think about this book, and I don't know. I brought it. Hopefully, Marty will give it a little
Oh, I'm gonna.
read, and it talks about typography. It talks about like layout and sort of how like there were traditional, like, you know, you have like Macintosh and you have like these big names. It's like you had the branding there, but what is the new branding going to look like? And, you know, how do we have these conversations in person together and create them together?
Right. Especially like branding and copyright specifically, as the nature of the interaction of a company, corporation with the user is changing drastically in real time as you have like memes and social media become a thing. Like, it's like, to be successful going forward, you have to be able to communicate with the Zoomers and the way in which you communicate, a medium like memes.
With the Bens.
Yeah.
Our Zoomer Bens.
Yeah.
They're good at communicating, actually. I was like pretty surprised. Like, I think Carmen, Kaufman, and like so many other Bens that I go by, you know, various names. It's like, I feel like the Zoomers are really, I don't want to be like, the Zoomers are going to save us, but like, they know how to communicate in ways that are way more relevant than like you and I too.
Yes.
And I don't think it's because we're like old. I think they're just like really like, they understand their users so quickly.
Yeah.
It's like effortless.
Well, it's like,
Which is, I am so here for that. We need way more of those.
right? I mean, because we're
Bens.
we're transitioning. We're almost there, right? They're like, so those Bens you just mentioned, they're about 22, so they're born in 99, which is disgusting to think about.
I love it. I love it. They're the best.
But they always, like, when they grew up in a world where when they were infants, they could have had
Actually, one of those Bens is a lot is younger than that.
Yeah.
A couple years younger than that. But
yeah, they could have
Yeah.
they're born with the internet, right? Like, where I remember, I think I've told this many times, but I remember getting caller ID for the first time in Northeast Philly and be like, oh my God, I can see my Aunt Lisa's calling us. And
You're like, first cell phone. You're
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm fancy.
Ooh, and I'd like to get your perspective on this.
Yes.
This is a way at that oil and gas conference last week too. Somebody's like trying to like it was like, again, the trope, and this was day 2. So I had my reflective moment where I was like yelling and just vomiting at the guy, like, about all the problems that he had were not actually problems. Then day 2, somebody's like, yeah, I get it. It's like, how early are we? Like, if you had to like compare Bitcoin to the internet, and I compared it, like, we're at the point, and I remember this vividly, where I downloaded AOL, the internet, onto my family's gateway computer. I got AOL.
Oh, yeah.
From the back of a Backstreet Boys Millennium album. I got a free like AOL CD.
Nice.
And I put it in.
Were you on Messenger?
I was on
AOL to
Messenger. I like to surf a lot.
Do you remember your username?
I like to surf a lot.
Oh, that was that.
Yeah.
I thought you were just throwing that in there.
One word. Nobody could ever
Perfect.
read it. It was just like, I like to surf a lot. It was just
People would just emerge too, and you're like, how do
Yeah.
you know my name? I guess.
Yeah.
Sure, we're talking now.
And people were like, what is it? I was like,
I liked like breaking it down.
yeah. I should have, and it was all lowercase.
Okay,
I should have had like,
So where you're going with this before distracting with the username was that the day 2, this person was like, we're early, and you're thinking about like,
we're at the point where
you're
I'm
like having
taking
flashbacks of early
We're at the point in
internet.
Bitcoin where I'm taking AOL free trial CD out of the back of a Backstreet Boys Millennium album.
Great
and
album, by the way.
Putting it into
So
my
good.
gateway computer. Like, would you agree that's where we are?
I would even say we're earlier than that too, and maybe that's like another dark existential thing to say. But like, I think people often compare the internet with like the '90s. They're like, oh yeah, like you see all this like media of the '90s, but I think it just wasn't that interesting to people early on. But actually, one thing I'm into a lot is like audio, and you know, there were things like in the '70s and '60s, like around FM synthesis, like frequency modulation synthesis, that are like super relevant to phones and computers. And I remember like Alan. Do you know Alan Kay?
Rings a bell? Why would I know him?
Well, he's like I don't want to say like the grandfather, but he was very influential in like physical computing. So like, you know how we have like phones and tablets now, like often people will kind of credit him and others too with these sort of earlier ideas. And so you had folks like him at Xerox PARC doing these residencies, which I wish existed now. I would have loved an artist residency that was like Bitcoin related. That's so cool. So you see like, you know, photos of them like on synths, just like, honestly, probably having their intellectual property taken advantage of, but just like coming up with really crazy ideas about like the internet, and like focusing on audio. To me, that was like always the most interesting thing, where getting into like math and synthesis, and like people then thought they were crazy, and now it's like everyone has a phone. And then people were like, oh no, like the internet is just going to be like for porn and whatever. It's like I literally cannot get directions to somewhere sometimes without my phone. And as much as I'm like, don't use Google, I'm like shameless. That's the only thing that feels like right and easy to use. Like I will just be tracked instantly to get. I did it here to get to your house. Like it was just like,
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going.
I had
So I think actually 60s, 70s is what I would compare early now. Maybe like 70s because it's been like 13 years, right?
yeah, only
Maybe we're
13
like
years.
70, late 70s right
Well, that's
now.
one thing I always worry, like not worry, but like think about again these comparisons, 90s, 70s internet, like even though it's only been 13 years of Bitcoin, like it's
Well, computing and internet are different, but yeah.
yeah.
As I interrupt you again,
No, no.
proceed as I continue.
It's
to
an
interrupt
important.
you.
It's an important distinction. They are different, but like even though they are different, like Bitcoin being launched in 2008, like we had the internet, we had all the computing built out. Like how fast do these trends happen, or how much faster do they happen with those conditions taken into consideration? Like we have the ability to coordinate on social media and game plan and do user research immediately, where that didn't exist for the internet, didn't exist for computing. Like how much quicker do things change now that we live in this environment of instant communication globally? Or does it not even matter?
Well, does anything matter? We're getting real existential here. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say what should and shouldn't matter, but yeah, I think that timeline is super interesting to lay out. It's like if we're comparing it, like what does it mean for design and open source? What is that? What was the equivalent? I would love to see if we're comparing these like timelines. I would love to see more artists get involved. I think about with early computing, like John Chowning and FM Synthesis and people who like came out and they were actually like John Chowning was in the military. He was in like a band and like came to do he was at Stanford just like doing music and then started paying attention to like Max Matthews and all these people sort of like at Bell Labs. And it's like, what do we do when we like create different disciplines? We put them together. And I would love to see like, and then you have like these Yamaha products that sell for tons of money. And it's like, those were the highest grossing patents before like Google or genetics or whatever at Stanford. And I think that when we can, I hate to say this, but people follow the money. Like I think when Bitcoin becomes and products become more lucrative, I really hate to say this, but because it feels so gross, but like I think we need artists and designers to come in here and make it nice. It's like when people understand like, oh wait, we can like patent this, like because again another example of like intellectual property probably being taken advantage of, but like when we have these sort of minds challenging our ideas of like, no, we could do something completely different with Bitcoin. I think that's when we have more of like the early 2000s kind of current like Bitcoin state.
Yeah.
It's like if we're comparing it to like internet timeline.
Yeah, people actually adding good HTML, CSS to the internet so you can
I hate to say like adding value. So much adds value, but I mean, I think a lot of people don't think like Bitcoin is legit until they understand how it's relevant for them. And I think the idea of like freedom, if you can't relate to it in another country, it's like authoritarian. Like you might only relate to making money.
Yeah.
Sadly.
I mean, number go up, many say, is the best, or the, not most, well, it is, I would argue it's most important, but like also, because you want that liquidity, but it all, again, is an attention grabber as well that gravitates people in.
Yeah, that changing of industry, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as someone who came from a different background and now you're like fully immersed in Bitcoin, maybe till you retire? I don't know if that's the game plan. But I don't know what the game plan is, but that's another pod for another day. I wonder, for other people too, like, did you ever see this path happening for yourself and for designers who are getting into it? Do you think it's realistic for them to think about a role where they're maybe in a different industry and they have a place here in Bitcoin?
Well, yeah, and that's actually a great segue into one thing I want to bring up. Like, Bitcoin has this inherent utility, right? Peer-to-peer digital distributed cash system. You can now like Taproot, even before Taproot, you can do interesting things with the transaction. You can set conditions that allow you to spend if each condition is met, or if different conditions are met, you do different things. Then you have the Lightning Network and all that. So there's utilities there, but it's somewhat buried or hidden, right? And like as a designer, that's what your job is to do, is to like not only highlight that utility, but make it so people can access it with as little friction as possible. And once you do that, so like tying this back to what you were saying, like you as a designer, you can be directly responsible for people's ability to access the utility that Bitcoin provides, which will produce more demand for Bitcoin, which will make the price go up. Like that's like one thing I heavily like as we untap this utility via design, via user experience and user interfaces. Like it's just going to drive demand for Bitcoin. It's going to be easier to use. Therefore, people are going to be more likely to use it, and they're going to want to use it more.
So where do designers come in? When I'm starting a Bitcoin company, I'm like, I got this wallet, whether it's open source or not, whatever. At what point do you think people should think about getting designers in? I think straight through. I think immediately, but I feel like
I don't think you can't.
What if they're just like, we have no money, we're seed stage, like or whatever. It's just a group of us. You think they should just say, who's the designer they need first? Is it someone who is product based? Is it someone who's a user researcher? What do you think is the most powerful way? And how do we take those roles and expand them so we have a more diverse team? Like when you go, I don't know, when you're at boot camp, when you tell these people come in to do their lectures from their studio, it usually wasn't one person. They're small studios, but people have different backgrounds, right?
Yeah. That's what, like, when you said users.
How do you build out those teams, right? Like, how do you get someone who's like, I'm a design director. Okay, cool. Like, I do web. I build out for mobile. Like, whatever, How do you get those teams to form? And how do we make sure people who are building Bitcoin companies know that they matter? It feels like an afterthought, doesn't it?
Well, exactly, which I think is a broader question just for app developers and software developers and people building companies in the digital age, like beyond Bitcoin. Like how you should approach a product that you're building with software with a design mindset, no matter what you're building, right? And I think that's maybe something that I don't even want to say was lost. It was just like never found for a lot of people.
Why do you think that is?
Because people think software is magic. They don't understand.
It can be, but design is way more magical.
Well,
I think that's like a bias for sure.
No, but design untaps that utility that magic provides, right?
No,
you can't.
100%, and like that's part of the reason I ended up going to New York too. Like Stanford doesn't have a design. They have a mechanical engineering degree, but like they don't have the things like a design school has, or that's why the internet is so special. You can learn a lot of this for free online, like. In those design utilities, I think like it doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be like we're software based or we're technical. Like we'll get designers later. I think having them both work together is like where the magic is.
Yeah, I think you need it. Right?
I think so too. We're obviously preferential. We're like shamelessly design heavy, which I would love to see more of. But I also I understand if people have their own ideas.
Well, if you were a software developer, you were a designer.
You are designing, yeah. No,
designing.
It can be very artful, but in terms of like learning things like color theory or those don't matter as much. But I mean, there are things in terms of like design principles in the book too. But I think I wish we're like taught in other things like if you're getting a computer science degree, maybe you should be like required to take some design courses. Yeah. That'd be cool.
And if you're a designer, maybe you should. Learn how the software works as
100%.
well, right?
I'm always saying that people should know how to program. Yeah. Which is hard, if you're like trying to get over that hurdle of like.
Simple things like, right? Perfect example of this: you send an on-chain transaction, and it doesn't confirm right away. How do you let the user know that? Like you have to understand Bitcoin at the protocol layer, like how broadcasting a transaction and then waiting for it to get included in a block. You have to understand that process to design communication tools within the app to let the user know what's happening.
And just to be able to talk to your team, right? Like just to be able to talk to someone who is a developer primarily or who's a designer primarily, like knowing how to like program, be like, I don't know how this is going to go, but I have like a little bit of background. I can kind of like prototype something for you super quick. It's quick and dirty, but it gives you an idea of what I'm thinking of, right? Or, a developer too, being like, look, this may not be like the final product here, but like I went into Figma and here's what I think would be cool. Like just being able to have like a productive dialogue on a team too. Mm-hmm. That way you do create a better product for people.
Yeah, and for some reason when you're describing that, I can't stop thinking of like the meme that's out there where you have like the designer, the marketer, the developer.
I haven't seen it. Oh my God, will you send it to me?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of them out there because you have this dynamic between like the product manager, the marketing team. It's like, it's a popular meme in like SaaS companies, right? You have the marketing team that's going out and customer facing, the sales team saying, we can give you this. We'll give you whatever.
I've seen some versions of that, but I don't know which one you're specifically talking about. Yeah, they like promise it, and then there's like someone at the top who's like, yeah, go for it.
And the developer's like, that's not.
It's never gonna happen.
How it works.
Is it like the one with bloodshot eyes? Like,
yeah. And then
I'm learning about like Wojaks and stuff now. Like I'm learning about meme culture because I feel like I avoided social media for so long, which was probably very healthy. I think I'm about to delete it again. But I'm learning I want to be able to keep up in conversations. So I need to learn this meme.
I've been so busy in the last few weeks that I've just naturally been away from social media more than I typically am, and it has been very good for my mental health. I can say that. It's easy to get triggered online. It's very easy.
So easy. And I think about that too. Like, a part of me is like, it's so valuable to connect with people on things like Twitter, and the part of me is like, don't we have enough problems in Bitcoin where we should be focusing on this? Like, I think I just death scrolled for 3 hours. I think I just stalked like 6 people I've never met before. And then you're like, I'm not mad at it though. That time felt meaningful to me, and like I was happy, but shouldn't we like fix some things with Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Like, not fix, but like honestly, some stuff you're like, who's gonna create that if you don't? Like, it could be easy. It's just like a Figma file. Like, if you don't do it.
What are some examples of this?
I don't know. I feel like for me that some things I'm behind on are, even things like the merchant section, even things like feedback or, someone's like, hey, I just posted on GitHub, like PR's here. Like, reviewing is so like, you don't need to know everything to be able to like look through someone's request and just be like, oh, you committed this. Like, let me just take a couple hours tonight, have a glass of wine, go on GitHub, and just offer something. Like, it could even be like 2 tips that are better, and that improves it. Or it could be something like you jump in and you're like working on a UX UI thing. I think, people or groups like BTC Pay are so open where it's like, you want to come in, you like design? I don't know, like talk to Pav. Like he'll be like, here's the meetings or calendars here. So I think there's like great examples of, you don't have to work that hard to give really meaningful feedback. You don't have to have the most talented or biggest portfolio possible. And you could still, just the time you take, I'm not trying to like put any social media companies out of business, by the way, like they don't need the business, but the time we take, it's like, is it valuable? And like, could I be applying it to Bitcoin in a productive way? Not to guilt people who like go on Twitter, that's a thing. But Matt talks about this, Matt Odell all the time, where it's like, we could be thinking about privacy and maybe taking a little time away from that and working on something more productive for privacy, right?
Yeah.
I'm lazy and guilty too, though. Like, I'm totally that person.
I'm very guilty of it. I could stop chasing Dave Troy around Twitter and telling him he's going to be poor. Because
we're like trying to come to Alex's like rescue. Everyone's like, get Dave.
Yeah. Fuck you, Dave.
But what do you think about that? I'd love to throw that question back at you. Like, if you weren't doom scrolling, a few days a week or a few days a month, whatever, what are some things that you would take a few hours on and just improve? Ooh, is this like a good prompt to be like, what are we going to do in the next week or two?
It certainly is.
Should we be accountable?
Well, again, like I said, I've been trying to make myself busier to stay away from it. And another thing, a lot of my doom scrolling usually happens right when I wake up. I'll wake up early and I'll just be like, fuck, like just doom scrolling. So I've tried to supplement that by forcing myself to wake up and get early morning workouts in, excuse me.
Nice.
I'm doing like 6 a.m. workouts, just like get up, get out, and I'm back. And it's like, all right, I gotta get my day started. Like, I don't think I've sent a tweet today, which is other than the podcast I just posted.
No shame in sending a tweet, by the way. But like, time and place, right?
Yeah,
time and
exactly. So that's like make myself busier. And then I've got a child now, a wife. And that's like the one thing, if I ever catch myself and I'm like on the couch, my son's standing there and I'm like scrolling, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? I should be doing flashcards with him or something like that.
But you can catch yourself, and that's like the most important thing. Like, being able to like take a second and just like have a beat and be like, you know what? There are more important things. Like, and this isn't a diss to like any, like we're just talking about mediums. I actually feel like these mediums can be super informative to people, but it's like, like sitting down and like setting out priorities or just knowing mentally, like, here's what matters to me. Yeah. And I think that is like a great way to design your life.
That's what, it's not up right now, but that's another thing too. I was having this conversation, I forget exactly, with, I think one of my brother's friends was over yesterday and I was talking to him about it. He's like, I don't get Twitter. It's like just so loud. And I'm like, it is. But if you know how to use like TweetDeck and filter and list, like, it can be very productive.
You added me to a list. I had no idea. Like, I told you, I only created this in June because the Benz like pressured me a bit into it, which I'm not mad at, but I'm also just like, I don't even know when someone puts me on a list. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, these are the tools that I need to be using.
I'll show you.
For me, Marty added me to a list. I wish it said what list. Is it like, do you want to be on this list? I know I get added to people's lists sometimes, and I'm like, what does this mean for me?
I put you on my Bitcoin list.
Oh.
So you can see here.
Wow.
See, I filter very aggressively on Twitter. I think TweetDeck's, if you're not using TweetDeck on Twitter, you're using Twitter wrong.
Wait, this is so fun, Marty. I love this little situation that we have going on here.
So
I'm having a great time.
So I have Bitcoin. Anybody talking about Bitcoin, I put on that list. Finance and economics, so macro markets, they go on that list. Oil and gas Twitter, obviously the mining world. I've been getting more acquainted with the oil and gas side of things, so I need to learn. So I have experts in the oil and gas sector on that list, and then when I just want to laugh at something, I have my Barstool Sports list, and I'll find.
Laughing is important. Comedy is important. Life is dark enough. We need to laugh at it a little.
Yeah, and so when I need to lighten it up, I'll go over to that list.
Keep it light.
And
keep it fun.
Yeah, Bitcoin urbanism. Speaking of design, I'm one of those romantic Bitcoiners who wants good architecture to come back.
1,000%. Oh my! I'm with you.
Not even architecture, but like designing cities correctly. Like this shout out to everything going on in El Salvador, but I think the idea that you're just going to like create a Bitcoin city and design it from scratch.
You're here for it.
No,
you're not here for it. Okay,
no.
Let you finish. I was like, where is this going?
No, like this is like an example. Like,
okay,
you're gonna have President Bukele like issue this this $1 billion bond, 500 million of which you're gonna buy Bitcoin. 500 million is gonna build out this Bitcoin city. Like, that's not how cities should come to be. You should not like issue a bond and be like, we're going to build a city. It has to happen naturally.
I can't advise on like how a Bitcoin city should be built because it feels to me like that's not my like wheelhouse. But like, what's a better alternative? I've heard a lot of people be critical, which, at first glance you're like, oh, kind of like, I get it. But like, what do you think is like a better alternative? If
you're seeing it right now in Austin.
Okay.
I think what's going on in Austin, like I came down here and there's a lot of people who are just being, and it's not like we're going to build this city and it's going to be a Bitcoin city. It's like, all right. I think Parker Lewis has done a good job of recruiting people to Austin specifically.
We love Parker.
But yeah, no, I came, many reasons. Growing a family, want to be able to live in an affordable house with room and a yard so my child can run around, not a studio apartment in New York. And you
can keep more of your family here. I mean, I didn't even know about your sister. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's here.
Being able to support family, I think, is like, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree. But like I came down here, there's a bunch of other Bitcoiners coming down here. It's just like happening somewhat naturally.
Yeah.
And Austin is becoming a Bitcoin city, I would say.
So you think it has to be...
I don't like the idea of like building out, like, it's going to be like very subdivision-y, I would imagine. And like, there's other people too, like building compounds in like Mexico and stuff like that. I'm like, me personally, like I want to live by my family. I will move to a city with a lot of Bitcoiners in it, but I don't want to like live in a Bitcoiner commune at all.
Yeah, different approaches. I feel like also, I want to be able to want to use something or want to do something. And if my opinion changes, I want to be able to like change my mind on things. Or if I'm wrong about something, like tell me I'm wrong and like let me learn. So yeah, I think there's definitely, I don't know, I couldn't advise on it, as I said, but I think choice is a good thing, and people should have the optionality of doing what they want. And if it's not Bitcoin, that's fine too. I hope it is one day. I think it will be one day, but I don't think we should force anything on anybody. Yeah. Like anything on anybody.
Well, yeah, we don't, and that's the beauty of it. We don't have to when it comes to Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin's just gonna naturally, you're gonna have to interact with it and design for it at some point in the future, if it does become what we believe it will, which I think is happening and will continue to happen. But again, if you're a designer out there, get in early.
Let's do it.
Make your mark.
It doesn't feel early to me. I don't know why it doesn't feel early to me. Maybe it's just because like we've been growing up with the internet for so long. I don't know. Were you on IRC before?
I've never been on IRC.
Oh, IRC's
Told
fun.
you, I'm lazy.
You should do it.
Downloading like the free node project and getting into IRC.
I mean, it's problematic in some ways, but isn't everything on the internet? So I don't know. I feel like to me, it's just like the design factors for sure. I would say like newer, but I don't know. It feels like it's should have happened so long ago, and I feel like people are finally coming together. Like we were all in. So I feel like for me, like most people that I talk to about design are not U.S. based. So
really,
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting. There's a lot of people in Europe who I talk to pretty frequently. Quite a few people in Nigeria, especially younger people in Nigeria, which I am obsessed with. I'm like, I want younger people from like non-Western countries to like to hop into the conversation. It's like, how do we help each other? Like, you don't need some like, you know, not that I'm old, but I can accept that I'm aging. You don't need like some
Stop it.
woman in America, like white woman in America, telling you how to design. I want to learn from you. Like, tell me what I'm missing. And like, I think that's like what's so incredible about it. It happens with core, and I mean, I love chain code. I did the whole GitHub curriculum, but I think that it happens in a way that it's maybe supposed to happen. I don't know if there's like destiny or fate or whatever, but it feels very natural when you're talking with people. It almost feels like, do you talk to like Bitcoiners at BitDevs and you're like, I feel like I just understand your soul.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even though you're different people and you have different opinions and you're like, okay, I don't know if I believe that aspect. Like, we are not the same. There are some people where I'm like, we are not the same. But like,
it's okay.
But you understand a little bit about like almost like no time has passed. You're just like all of a sudden at Cooper's like 10 minutes later and you're like, anyway, so tell me about your family. like the whole, you're like, okay, this. I just feel like you can't do that with a lot of other people. And people are so generous and kind. I think that's like a bad rep that people in Bitcoin get. It's like, oh, you're like
toxic.
So toxic. It's like, yeah, no, they're very kind. And I just feel like when you meet people in person, when you go to these meetups, it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm sensitive or something, but like,
no,
I feel like I can like relate to people without even knowing them.
Yeah, I've experienced this for years now in the Bitcoin community. Matt Odell is a very eloquent way of describing it too.
Oh, he's
it's
the
like
best.
you're kindred spirits almost, and it's like this thing is, Bitcoin's, I think a lot of Bitcoiners understand that Bitcoin's bigger than any of us individuals in it.
Correct. Yeah.
And it is.
Most people.
Yes.
Some people are in it for other reasons, but
Yeah.
but most people who you go to these like community events with, yes.
Yes, and it's somewhat of like a space race Manhattan project. And if you're at these community events, a BitDevs, similar meetups, I think everybody has or most would have a base layer understanding of what's at stake and are there for very intentioned reasons. And I think that's just like everybody has an unspoken agreement that around that, and it just creates an easy jumping off point for me. Like, all right, we know we agree on Bitcoin, that it's necessary, and that it's imperative. Like, I like you.
Yeah. Even if we don't agree on a lot of
Yes.
things, I like you. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And that's one thing too, where it's like I look at the world and it's easy to focus on the problems, but then I meet people and you go to these events and it almost like restores your soul a little bit. Like, I don't know if it feels like a family reunion when you go to like some of these conferences. You're like, hey guys, we haven't seen each other in a year. And like almost like twice a week we're meeting online. And like, it feels so good to like meet people for the first time who you've met on the internet. Is that weird? Like, I don't know if it's creepy, but like maybe during MySpace days that would have been creepy to be like, yeah, we just met on the internet. We're going to go to a park tomorrow. Like, that would be maybe a different situation. But like, I feel like with Bitcoin, there's like a rich conversation around it. And like, not to say there's not creepy experiences. Those can happen anywhere. But it feels like so good for your soul when you meet people.
Oh yeah, it still freaks my wife out. She's like, you're just meeting random people on the internet and meeting them in person? I'm like, yes.
Like, yeah, babe.
Yes.
It's great.
This is what's happening, honey.
But she's gone to some events, right? She's gone to some Bitcoin things.
She's been.
How does she feel about it?
She
You can be
she
honest.
loves it. She's been to Bitcoin 2019 and Bitcoin 2021, so she's been to that conference twice.
Any Austin stuff? Any events here?
No, not outside of like us meeting up with other Bitcoiners that have kids and like at the park.
Yeah, like casual.
Yeah, yeah. I brought her sister to BitDevs
Oh.
2 months ago, and that
How
was
was it?
It was good. Her sister's getting more into Bitcoin. Yeah, but my wife, she would not fare well to BitDev. She would die of boredom within like 15
I
minutes.
think that can be healthy to have like partners and people in your life who are just like, that's your thing.
Yeah.
That's your thing.
Yeah.
That's great though. I feel like getting the family on board in their own ways that feel comfortable to them is so good. And it's like we said, like designing quality of life and like making sure that you don't understand. I mean, don't go too deep into Bitcoin where you lose like what's important to you, like family, friends, like quality time,
Exactly.
So-
It's a tool to make those things better and more secure, which many people do lose that sort of guiding principle.
Why do you think that is?
I think there's a lot of clout chasing out there where people,
For sure.
like similarly
For sure.
to where there's an open opportunity for designers to make their mark in the world. I think a lot of quote unquote Bitcoiners out there think they can do that as well by articulating their thoughts aggressively and vehemently and often online.
There's like some drama too about people stealing each other's tweets or something. Like there's like all this like cloud chasing that I don't understand. I don't seek to be a part of, but just part of the reason I'm like, do I delete this account? Like I just want nothing to do with it. In fact, it really creeps me out in like a lot of ways. But that's not to say, I mean, I get it. People have to put food on the table. Maybe that's someone's like being an influencer as like a job for people. I don't know. I don't pretend to understand that world, but I definitely think one quality about Bitcoiners that I really appreciate is they're so smart. I think most of them get it and they're intuitive enough to be like, the people who are really building and creating things and working on projects every day, they kind of know what's up. I think it's more sad for people who like don't really get it. And you're like, that could be really bad if you just like blindly follow these people and you're like, well, they got rich off of it. Like they're telling me they did this. So like, great, let's do it. Or they know like so-and-so, like this is great. Like that is really dangerous. And I don't know how we like get people involved and more focused on like building and making and being creative with Bitcoin and, you know, off the influencer track. Like who cares about clout? Like I'd rather be like a person who has 0 followers and no account and just being like have 2 friends in like a channel that I'm making something cool with.
Yeah.
You maybe you can relate to that. You do the podcast, right? Like
well, that's
you have your like core group of people and you're like, let's focus and go deep. Like that to me is amazing.
Yeah. And that's what I try. I mean, again, I got the irony of being a podcaster and tweeting a lot, and me saying that like there's a lot of clout chasing going on and it's not lost. And that's one thing I tried to.
Oh, you own it, of course. You own it.
Well, own it and also like have intention with the podcast and the newsletter and what I put out there. Like I want to like, I'm not doing it to clout chase. I'm trying to be as authentic as possible and to push people. That's why I'm very happy to have you on. Like, I don't think there's enough people talking about design and Bitcoin.
I have nothing useful to show. I have no product. There's no VC on my back. And I thought about it too. I was like, do I even like come on and talk? Like, there's no one making me do this. There's no like incentive. The incentive is to make Bitcoin better always, right? And I hope that more people are on board with that. And you know, I hope that more people are driven by that just intrinsic value. I think they are. I think that's like people like you who do this podcast and started off. And of course, there's sponsors and whatever. But like, I mean, there's like something deep within you, I think that eventually you get to if you're in Bitcoin like long enough, and it just draws you to make it better for people and people who you don't even know or people who don't exist yet or whatever. It's like just for everybody, making it, and it's impossible to do it for everybody, but as many people as you can. Life is short. We're going to die soon. Let's make something cool that people can use and maybe they make it better, but if we don't start somewhere and we don't give them something to jump off on, like I don't want this project to die. I want like, you know, good family units and people who care about each other and go out to the community and take care of each other. Like, I think Bitcoin brings out the best in people, and I want more of that.
I do as well. And you actually just made me think of something while you were saying that. Like
during my many rants.
Do you see a scenario in which we could, like a lot of people would argue that the internet as designed and implemented in its current iteration, there was a lot of early design mistakes, particularly around the storing of personal information that have created a big headache today for users of the internet. Like, do you foresee that possibility creeping into Bitcoin? If so, like from a design perspective,
I think it already has. Let you finish your question though. From a design perspective, what?
Just from a design perspective, like are there things that like we're doing now that could, in your view, lead to headaches in the future?
Yeah, well, I think like Matt Odell does such a good job about like pushing privacy, pushing security, but yeah, even simple things like you're on an app, like they track you. That is not always safe, right? And like we normalize a lot of that, just like download whatever and keep it on your phone. But like, yeah, having things stored and just because you don't, you know, someone says they delete your data, you still put it out there. So yeah, I anticipate problems. I don't think anything is perfect, but I think you got to be realistic about it and try every day to be a little bit safer and a little bit more private. No one's perfect. We're all human. We're going to make mistakes. But even, you know, data use isn't the only thing we made. we did, I don't want to say wrong, but like that was problematic. You know, you think about how was the early internet funded, right? Who made this happen? Who funded these researchers who were grad students, like 20 years old, and they were just brilliant, you know, DARPA, like a lot of military presence, right? And I'll say that was the only thing funding it, but if you were really to like be honest, like it's military support. I know a lot of people in Bitcoin have strong opinions about human freedom and war and then the violence of government. And I probably should be saying this publicly on a podcast, but like, I think that it's important to just be aware, like, we would not have the internet if it was not for some of that funding. And that does get to be a very complicated conversation. And so when I think about Bitcoin, do I think that won't still happen, where we won't have sources of funding that are coming from problematic places? No, I anticipate that happening. And I do have concerns about that. So yeah, as much as I'm like data and privacy, like, of course, that is a huge safety concern. But I also worry about like what we're contributing to and like what it means long term for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's much larger than you or I, but I don't know. I just try to stay positive and work on projects in my own small way. I don't know. I have a lot of fears. I probably shouldn't make people gear up to the fear train. Like,
talk more about your fears. What are your fears?
Talk about my dreams and my fears on this podcast. Ooh, I would love that for like a topic. It's like you just get people in a room like, what's your Bitcoin fantasy? What's your Bitcoin fear?
Song of the pod is Meek Mill's Dreams and Nightmares. We're gonna get that on at some point.
Wait, how do we feel about like Meek Mill's presence in Bitcoin? I feel like there's like a whole thing where, I don't know, and I've noticed this too. Like, I don't know if this is a completely different tangent, but one thing I also worry about too is like, probably the wrong people to be mentioning this about, but like I think about like A16Z and like how they have funds. It's great that they're getting like more like they're specifically Black funds, which I love to see. But it also troubles me that it's like celebrities and people who are like influential, maybe have like Scientology backgrounds. And like, I love, but like there are people where I'm like, actually like, I feel like Chris Lyons and certain people, it's like, you could like really look to them and be like, that is a great example of someone where like, I don't know if I could ever get into some of the programs he's been into, ever have the same experience, but like, I do worry that like a lot of the cultural influence where it's like, oh, you're a rapper and whatever, like, I don't want to miseducate people. And I want people to feel safe too. If they're rappers and they're like, I own Bitcoin, I don't want them to feel like they're still a Bitcoiner. Yeah. I don't care if someone's like rich or famous. It's like, I always want to look out for their safety. And I'm like, I don't know. Are we like doing people a disservice by like publicly making it a thing? I don't know. Like, is that a problem? Obsessed with Megan Thee Stallion, so she can give me tutorials all day. But
thank you for the stats you sent me, Megan Thee Stallion.
She's also a Texan. Texan, yeah, just like Erykah Badu, some great Texans out here.
Yeah, that it is hard though. Like, I go back and forth, right? Like, obviously, like Jameson Lops made it a point to be like, don't publicize that you're a Bitcoiner. People will $5 wrench attack you in the future.
But maybe they're already so famous it doesn't matter. They have great security. I don't know. But like, I just want, I don't know. I want people to be safe. Well, I worry about that.
I do as well too.
And it's like, so, people don't realize when they're like commenting and they're just like, I don't know. I'm not trying to be crazy, but I do see that where I'm like, it's great to get the free sats, but now you just like, are saying I'm interested, which is like another public way. I hope they're doing it with, I don't know, people talk about this. Like, you hope that people have the foresight to know to use like a NIM, but not always. Sometimes you use your first and last name because you just are wanting to be open with people.
Yeah, and
it could be
that's where I go back and forth.
Sats. It could be like nothing, but if people, I don't know.
So
I have a lot of safety concerns about people.
Well, I default to the safety concerns, and default, like my default view is people should have concerns over their safety as they're accumulating Bitcoin. But then like, there's also the white pill Marty side of me where it's like, hey, if this is successful, it's going to be pretty pervasive, and you're just going to assume everybody has Bitcoin. Right?
Yeah.
At that point, is the risk that high? I mean, unless you're talking about exactly how much Bitcoin you own, I think. And that's another thing design can fix too. You can design experiences where somebody
we can do it all
can come up to you and you're like, if you design experiences that become pervasive, that make it so any potential attacker has to factor in the probability that Bitcoiners are using software in a way where you can't just walk up to them and take their Bitcoin.
Yeah. Totally.
Like,
yeah, and people have talked about that too, where it's like, if you're in a country where there's gang violence and you don't even know it, like you might have to give all your Bitcoin that's in your wallet, and if you don't know to take it off and have like, you may just have fallen into this Bitcoin situation because like your government was like, here's Bitcoin, we're doing this now, and then you're like, okay, cool, I have all my funds on my wallet, and like that gets taken because you go into the wrong area at the wrong time. Like, I don't know, there's so many safety concerns and like physical safety, and I also worry about, I don't know, we can get really into this, but like, I just want people to be like, I actually really appreciate the education. So from like a celebrity perspective, I'm like, if that's what needs to happen for people to have their attention, like to start saving and things like that, that's great. But like, I don't know, publicly putting your information on social media, like that scares me. And I hope that like, maybe that's where design can come in. And maybe like, I think that's the right view. We have to be optimistic. Like we can't just go down this like crazy thing where it's like, oh no, well, it's going to get violent. It might, but I'd rather be positive and get as many talented people as possible to be like, actually, here are the safety concerns, and let's talk about them, and how do we improve them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's funny. Whenever I go back to Barstool, Big Cat always asks me, how much Bitcoin do you own? Bitcoin Marty. And I'm like,
You don't ask.
stop asking me that question, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how much time we have or if we're running low, but I want to like just leave. I don't know. I want to ask like if you could have 3 designers in Bitcoin who were not dead or alive, any brand, any company, any product, you just are inspired by them. Who do you wish could be working in Bitcoin right now? Whether it be anonymously or not, like
What product?
who would you or like, yeah, what comes to mind? That are like these are the best of the best.
I mean, I'm happy we have Cash App focusing on Bitcoin because they.
You would say they're like one of the
very
best.
good
Okay.
design.
So that's one.
I
would agree with that, by
and
the
I
way.
think they do a good job of articulating it too. Like when they launched their Bitcoin thing and they had the Bitcoin children's storybook, I thought that was very nice.
I love it, yeah.
And they had like the mining piece that they did.
Is that more Square or Cash
I mean,
App? I don't know. Some of that was Square crypto, but yeah,
I mean,
whatever.
Steve
I
Jobs
understand.
is like an obvious, like it just feels almost too easy to say. So I'm like in my
Sure.
mind, I'm like, who except for Steve Jobs?
Design focus too. With Reed, do the whole thing where he's like crashing college at Reed or crashing classes at Reed College.
Yeah.
Like typography focused. I think we need more type designers like that.
And then
One more.
the dude who designed the Japanese toothpick.
What are you talking about?
That's another. It's like one of the like. So there was so much detail into the Japanese toothpick. Like you can snap off the top, like fifth of the
I'm gonna be
toothpick.
looking this up at like 3 a.m.
And this is just like, I mean, it's such a smart little design thing. I mean, it's like obviously wood, like a jagged, or not jagged, but a pointed end. And the other end, the dull end, it's got ridges in it. And you can snap one of the ridges. There's 2 ridges. You snap the lowest one off. And then if you only have one toothpick and you want to keep it clean, but you don't want to keep it in your mouth, you put the part that you snap down off, and then you rest the wet tip on the other ridge so that it's not sitting on a dirty surface. So that's like one beautiful.
just detail oriented.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's why I would want
Japanese
that
design
designer.
is so good. I know. I feel lucky that we have so many people in Japan who are focused on Bitcoin. I don't know how deep you get into it, but whenever like you're talking to people from Japan, you're like, I don't know, they're so thoughtful. Not even design, programmers too. I'm just like, wow, I actually didn't think about it from that perspective. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
like detail oriented. So
Yeah.
that's like again going back
Definitely.
to it, like it's important, right? Especially as like you have things like Taproot. I mean, Beck 32 now. So now like when you go in, you're like spin up a Bitcoin wallet. It's like, all right, what address structure do you
it's
want?
the little things.
Do you want a legacy? Do you want a wrap SegWit? Do you want Beck 32? Do you want pay to Taproot? Like, and then like, all right, as a new user, it's like, what the fuck does all this mean? Like,
Yeah, and how does it
communicate?
pertain to me? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
So you need like communication, detail-oriented quick communication within the app to. That's the thing about the Japanese toothpick. There's nothing needs to be communicated. It's almost.
So you're hoping it'll eventually get to that point where people just understand, like, I get what's going on here.
Yeah.
With very little explanation.
Yeah.
It's like an intuitive.
Yeah.
Those are great. I don't know if Carr is Mike, but I'm kind of curious about his perspective as well. Maybe he can tell us offline. Maybe he can tweet it. Oh, he does a mic. Maybe
He does have a mic.
Oh, yes.
I was looking it up, Marty, but
You're not coming in.
oh, I'm not.
I can hear him. I don't know if that's what you mean by coming in, but I can hear him on my end.
Here,
Oh, I can't hear you on my headphones. If you can hear on your.
I was
There.
gonna say Shigeru Matsumoto. I think that would be my pick.
Shigeru Matsumoto.
The guy who made Mario and Nintendo.
Ooh.
I think like I would
That's
like to see what
iconic.
Bitcoin would look like under his vision. You know,
Yeah.
that would be cool.
Hell yeah. I mean, he's dealt with a lot of pipes in his life too, which Bitcoin has a lot of pipes, whether it be transaction relay or internet bandwidth and
Love
stuff like
it.
that to take into consideration.
Love it. Carr, 2 more. You have a punk rock background. Anybody who you think could bring a little fire to Bitcoin?
Oh man,
Artist, designer, maker.
I'm just waiting for like Radiohead to do something. I don't know why the hell they're not doing anything. And then like Beastie Boys would be cool too.
Oh, we
think
can't
if
though.
they-
Not the OG. We could never get the OGs back. 'Cause RIP,
yeah.
you
Rest
know.
in peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to see what Radiohead would do. And then of course I'm
That'd be
waiting for
fun.
like what's that? Banksy. I want to see what he does. So I think he's just gonna drop something. It's just gonna shock everybody when he does jump on Bitcoin.
Totally. I think Carr kind of hit the nail on the head when I was talking about like things being like poetic. And maybe I'm saying it the wrong way, but like, just like, yeah, you're talking about just dropping something. Like people need to understand it in a different way, in a different lens. And when it creates a conversation and people are like, wait, what's going on? Whether it be positive or negative, it's like, no, you can only say things so many times the same way before it's exhausting. And people are just like, look, I get it. And they don't want to hear it. But maybe if you had like a different piece of conversation, especially public art or things that aren't private, like that's kind of what's amazing about like open source, but like just throwing it out there in the world and be like, anybody wants to see this? Here it is.
Yeah.
You know?
Now you say that, being from Philadelphia, it's such a shame that they've fucking destroyed Love Park. That's another example.
That was such a good skate spot.
Kevin Bacon's dad, he was the architect that designed Love Park. And
Really?
Yeah. And
Was that like a thing that locals talked about? Like doing the tour of the city, like Kevin Bacon's dad.
he
Like a Robin Williams San Francisco thing. We're like, oh yeah. And so
he did a lot of things in Philly. Kevin Bacon's from Philly.
I didn't know
His
that.
dad was an architect. But yeah, that was like another thing. Like, he designed this park as this public
Interesting.
space and didn't realize skaters would take it over and become like one of the most iconic skate spots
So good.
in the world. But
Yeah.
like, he was so cool about it too. That's why I respect him particularly, because he loved that it turned into this thing he never imagined it would, where like literally like be in video games just because of the way it was structured.
Yeah, that Mark Suchu Away Days, the Adidas videos. Good. That was like the last one I remember watching before it got.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, Stevie Williams got his chops there. Chris
Woo.
Chris Cole.
What
Cole?
about Papa Bent? Your dad skated, right?
My
Skated?
dad skated, yeah. In the 80s, he was a kid running around Philly.
When's your
in
dad
North-
doing an episode here?
Ha! You are.
I would love that.
So he runs a coffee shop back at our hometown, and over Christmas break, we're gonna do a podcast with my dad and our neighbor.
Yes. Yes, I can't wait.
They're kindred spirits. They have a bromance, and they run this coffee shop together. I think it's just gonna be funny to get. I've been onboarding them on the Bitcoin as well. I think.
So great. See, I feel like people like are like, oh, well, I'm at this age, I can't possibly. And then I like hear your dad in like some of these episodes, and your dad's just like down. I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
this is great. Like,
So he's
like Papa Ben, I'm here for.
Papa Ben grew up punk rock. I think that's probably why.
Car's nodding. He's here for it.
We're
all here for
we
it.
listened to a lot of punk rock growing up. I think that's why I have a bit of a rebellious. I skated.
So like East Coast punk rock, like Bad Brains. What are we talking
No,
here?
my dad was British punk. He liked the
Oh.
Clash. We listened to
Okay.
a lot of Clash.
What-
So not even punk rock. So like the Clash and the Cult were our two like go-to bands in the car. So yeah, like British punk in the Clash, and then like British 80s wave rock in the Cult.
You learn-
I guess you could say the Colt's a little punky too. Like Bad Fun's a good punk song, I would imagine.
I feel like so much of the music I learned was from skate videos. I used to work at a skate shop growing up, and it exposes you to so much like art and design too. And that's like one of the things that made me fall in love with like design too. Even just like how a board is made or the graphics on it,
Yeah.
and just like I don't know. Do you remember being so excited when you get your like a new
Oh, yeah.
setup? You're just like, yes, this is the best. And like I think about that experience super Bitcoin. I'm like, what's it gonna be like when you have your kids and you're just like, so here's a new hardware wallet. Like people already get so excited. I feel like when there's like, oh, an open dime. Like, oh, is this a different design? Like even the
Yeah.
small things. People who don't like maybe primarily identify as designers, like they're great at it too.
Well, that's funny you bring that up too, and you can see that like different tinge of personality in the different ski teams. Like Chocolate's different than Baker. It's different than where the Chocolate and Baker combined.
Chocolate and Girl are the same like ownership, like
Yeah.
Krill Top, and then Baker and Death Wish.
Death Wish, yeah.
Yeah.
Like when I was towards the tail end of my Chicago, like the Chocolate team, and it was like Raven Tershi,
Still killing it. Yeah.
still killing it. Well, he had to get out of the game for a while.
I mean, most people do, but Kenny Anderson's in his 40s and he's crushing it. So
Yeah.
it's like, you know, you have an injury, you come back, and I
Yeah.
think he still skates for Chocolate.
Who else was on the Chocolate team? It was like Raven Tershi, Elijah Burley,
Burl.
Burr.
As I correct you on your own podcast. What else can we talk about? What else can I just explain to you?
But they had
so
their
embarrassing. I'm sorry, Marty.
No, stop,
I will
please.
not. I will not. I will correct your skater last names.
No, you should, because that was wrong. But like, yeah, the Chocolate had a certain vibe to them. Baker had a certain vibe to them, and
Yeah. It's that branding. It's like getting that different. like again, like the girl in chocolate teams, like they were completely different, but it attracted different demographic, right? Like I might be more indie, like kind of like DIY collage kid, and I might gravitate towards Mark Johnson more than I gravitate towards Branson Beeble and like the celebrity kind of like heavy hitter Sean Malta. Like, I don't know, that's what's fun too. It's like, I don't think all Bitcoin design has to be the same. I hope we can get into that point where it's like, there are different little niches for people who are like, no, I want to be more like refined and like polished. And then there's gonna be some people who are gonna be like, no, I want to be more like hip hop and I want to do my own thing and I want to just, you know, I feel like people have like these different, just like different skate teams were like doing their own thing, I think.
Yeah.
I look forward to that day when it's like, I'm sitting there with my future kids, which I hope exists someday, you know, but I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, so we're looking for their new like hardware and I'm like, okay, what speaks to you? There's like not really a lot of that. There's a handful of options, but nothing where it has like personality and it has like style where it's just like, oh, that one is that and I identify with this and this is the cool brand right now.
Yeah. That's what I love about skating. You have so many different styles and like some, like people think I look like Jamie Foy.
Yes, a little bit.
If I grew my hair out and like,
I feel.
no, Jamie's definitely younger than me.
He's younger, but some people who skate who are young and they look old. To me, Jamie does not look young. I feel like you look younger.
But he's like a bruiser, like, and that's like something I identify as like a bigger dude and just like crushing like 30 stair.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Board slides and like, because that's one thing I do with my son when we wake up on Saturday morning.
Skate.
Well, he scooters, but we'll warm up by watching like Thrasher clips and stuff like that.
Nice.
And that's like one of the you just go like clip to clip, and it's a different song, a different style of skating, and that's just turning into a skating podcast now. That's
We're
like
talking
one
about
thing.
skating. No, we're gonna bring it back though because I do feel like one thing that's interesting about like Thrasher is like they've been in SF for so long and they've seen it like change from like a tech city to not. And I think about people who are in Bitcoin too, and they've seen like a lot of tech influence their lifestyle and like society too. Where it's like, I'm happy to keep this as a skate podcast, but like, I don't know. I think about like how our tools affect us and change us in our cities. And I don't think like a lot of tech has a lot of good services for cities like San Francisco, but you still have those fun, edgy pockets like Thrasher. And I think, you know, like how Austin has Bitcoin, I think that could be like the kind of like little edgy punk rock where it's like, we're going to see tech change it here too. It's already happening, right? For better or worse, whether you are, you know, I don't care if you're a Tesla employee or Google or whatever, like we're all friends, but it's going to change the city, you know, and in the same way that it did with the Bay Area at large. So it's like, how do we see things change, but have these like fun little like edgy moments?
Yeah.
I think it can happen. I think that's the cool part about it.
You know, things like Samurai Wallet, Ronin Dojo, other Sparrow Wallet, Spectre, and then they're like the edgy, like self-sovereign, very private, high caliber, technical, literate, user-centric designs.
We need more of it. Let's do it.
Yeah, and then you have like the Unchained of the world for the people looking for financial services and are okay with like using their Bitcoin as collateral and having to give up some information for some cash. And you have the Tesla. There's a little tangential to it, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's
I'm excited for the future. I'm excited for cities like Austin. I'm excited for, I don't know, just to be alive right now. I don't know, it feels like some people can get really negative, but like, I just feel lucky to be alive and like experience this and having these conversations and just like shooting the shit and being able to be like, we need more design. That's such a privilege.
Yeah. What is our, before we leave on it, two things from you.
Yes.
What are some projects that you believe have very good design principles and are designed well in the Bitcoin space? And what is your pitch? Obviously, we've given a lot of pitch to the designers today, but like, what's our ending pitch to the designing community that is looking outside, from the outside looking into Bitcoin?
Okay. I'll start with the first one, and that's what is a product in Bitcoin that I think is done really well.
Yeah, or a
design
few
perspective.
products, or like what are some examples of things that you think have been well thought out from a design perspective?
Well, I'm obviously biased and say BTC Pay because that's what I was drawn to. It's what I contribute to. What I hope will grow larger. And when I talk about open source, I mean, there's places that are open source, but they're full blown like making money in companies. I don't think we should leave them out of the conversation. I think there are many good examples. I think Cash App, while it's not open source, like as you said, it's great. Like I think that they really speak to their users and they listen. I think that's awesome. But I think BTC Pay, we're talking about accessibility. We're talking about languages. Like what other project has 29 languages where you can just drop down menu it? Like it's so easy and functional. And I know they're going to get even better too, which is something I'm excited about. So I would say BTC picks. I'm preferential, and I'm shameless. I will definitely pick favorites here. And the second question is, what is a pitch for people to join in? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
trying to recruit for projects? I would just say, I don't want to be prescriptive. I think everyone has a different gift, and designers, like, that's the thing. Design is huge. Like, specialties vary, and I think people should come in and find their own path. We have so many projects, so they come into the Slack. So bitcoin.design, just check it out. Leave if you want. Sign up if you want to. Sign up for the newsletter and come into some meetings. We do Jitsi. We do community calls. We've started doing Twitter Spaces, which has been like a fun experiment. So I think a cool one. I personally want help in the merchant section. So anybody who wants to hop in, and if you're even new to design, I'm happy to like walk you through whatever we're doing. What else is a cool one? I think that the icon set that they just released is really sweet. But come on in, just like message me on Bitcoin Design. We'll hang out.
Bitcoin.design.
Bitcoin.design. And there's so many, like, I feel almost weird being here because I'm not even the most active or interesting or cool or productive person. Like, you will be way more impressed with people on here. That's the one thing I will say. Like, I feel so humbled to even get to contribute in the small ways that I do. Like, if you want to see some real, like, cool open source designers, like, this is the spot.
Yeah.
I'm like nothing compared to like the Christophs out here. They're just so good.
Yeah, well, and if you're, don't sell yourself short, number one. Number two, if you're a designer, again, like, what is the goal? To make Bitcoin more acceptable and intuitive. And if you do that, and you help do that via design, you are going to bring more value to Bitcoin. By making it more acceptable, more intuitive, you're giving more people access to the utility that Bitcoin provides. And once they get that utility, they'll want more of it, and it's going to push Bitcoin forward. We need you.
We do.
I can't design for shit.
We need each other.
I had a lot of fun going to that design class and learning about it, but I can't even draw.
But there's always room for somebody too, right? Like, don't even feel like you couldn't give reviews or feedback or whatever.
Yes. That's what I'm good at.
How are designers going to design without your feedback?
I'm not going to wireframe anything for you or
record a video.
Make like a POC. Yes. That was funny. Last night, my wife and I went down the street to get dinner at a new neighbor's house, and their son is like 8 years old, was drawing, and he asked me to draw, and I like drew something,
sweet.
And it was way worse than what he was drawing.
People will surprise you too. I feel like some people are just like, oh, I'm not good at this, and then they do like an immaculate sketch, and you're like, I thought you just told me you weren't good at it. So it's like, sometimes what people think they're not good at, they're actually amazing at, or they're super humble.
I'm not being humble right now. Being straightforward, I cannot draw for shit.
This was fun, Marty.
And for sure, this was a lot of fun.
I want to do it again sometime. I cannot wait for your dad's episode. I'm like obsessed. I'm ready. Let's do it tomorrow. Ugh.
We're going to do it over the Christmas break.
Oh, I can't wait.
He's going to be pumped. He's going to listen to this, and he's going to be like, you said it. We're doing it.
No, you have to do it now.
We did talk about it. We talked about it over the weekend. He's got an interesting story.
Let's get into his design perspectives and his skater stories.
He's got a weird aesthetic. He's in his early 50s, and he's wearing like plaid Jeff caps now. He's just trying to look like a jazz dad. I'm like, Dad, chill out, bro.
I'm actually here for it. I'm like, go off, Dad. Do you? What else are we putting into the arsenal? Like, he's gonna be a fashion dad. I feel like we don't know it now. We're gonna look back and be like, actually, he knew what he was doing.
My dad does not have a. I'm not gonna shit on my dad. We'll talk about it on the podcast, Dad.
I'm ready. Let's do it. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you. Where can we find more about you? At BenTrisha21 on Twitter.
No, that won't last long. It'll be gone. Come on to Slack. Come build things with us. That's how we'll meet in real life. Go to a BitDevs.
Yes.
We'll hang out.
All right. We need you.
We do.
Peace and love, freaks.